Welcome to the Calder Farmstead.
Now the Ice Hawks back out to center in transition. Carlson with Quenneville 2-on-1. Right with Carlson, Quenneville scores!
Here's a chance for Herrick. Fighting scores! Off the face-off! Up it's Eminger. Pulled back to Werenski. Has it. Shoots one. Bounces off a man. 5 seconds left. Werenski. Another jam on the shot. Turning and firing. They go! They score! They score! Now they catch each other and they both go right over the top. Matching rights to one another. McDermott gets the helmet off of Cassie.
And now, with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out right side with Bear. Looks like cutting to the net. Bear will score!
And here are your hosts, Cece and Sean.
Hello and greetings from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
And Stockton, California.
Welcome to the Calder Farmstead Podcast, episode number 106 for Saturday, June 18th, 2022. If you're hoping for a podcast featuring tips on weeding and mulching crops, we are not going to be much help. This is the American Hockey League podcast, and my name is Cece Hockley, the AHL editor of Full Press Hockey.
And I'm Sean O'Brien from StatsTrack and the AHL's only league-wide analytics guy.
And as always, we thank you all for tuning in with us.
And if you're new to hearing Cece and I talk about hockey, we're going to do our playoff postmortems as well as preview the Calder Cup Finals for you. We both watch a lot of AHL games. We're going to talk about what we see when we watch the film, as well as use some advanced stats to help us break it down. If that's new to you, you may want to head over to our YouTube channel or podcast feed, wherever you're checking us out from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to be talking about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're new to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries, go check that out. So you better be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes, and let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes trying to get pre-sale tickets to Coachella. The only Coachella tickets worth your time are the Firebirds, not random DJs hitting play on Spotify. You'll never get that time back, so next time, why not spend a little more time with us talking hockey?
If you had Sean O'Brien, music critic, on your bingo card, please make an X now, or get one of those bingo spotters and just, there you go. So, well, we had some breaking news today. A new head coach was named in the AHL. She is going to be coming on a little bit later to talk Chicago Wolves, but she happens to be the co-host and producer of the Locked On Kings podcast as well. So we figured we'd pick her brain a little bit. Welcome back to the program, Sarah Avampato. Sarah, welcome back.
Hey, great timing to have this happen while we're getting ready for the Calder Cup final. It's like they knew that you were doing a podcast.
It's
Absolutely. For once, we are ahead of the news cycle. Usually this is something that comes out like 2 hours after the episode is posted. And it's like, oh. So I'm super thrilled. Finally, they matched a schedule with us. Yeah. The AHL got scheduling right, guys. It's a miracle.
Right. Don't say it too loud. They'll hear you, and then they'll,
they will adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
They evolve. Anyway. So, Sarah, yes, Marco Sturm, former assistant coach for the LA Kings, has been for the previous 3 seasons. He was named head coach of the Ontario Reign today, Friday, June 17th, when we record this. And also the head coach of Team Germany. He led the team to its first Olympic silver medal in 2018. The first time Germany even sniffed an Olympic medal in hockey since 1976. He also led Germany to the quarterfinals in the IIHF World Championships in 2018 as well, losing 2-1 to Canada, of course. All of Ontario's assistant coaches from last season, Chris Height, Craig Johnson, video coach Brad Schuler, goalie coach Matt Miller, all are returning as well. Did I get all of his cred right, Sarah? Did I?
You did. Okay. Plus, like, however many NHL games, and he's a known quantity to people.
The playing career parts we don't talk about because shockingly, playing isn't the same thing as coaching.
What?
Yeah, I know. I know that's a shock to a lot of AHL front offices that just because you play doesn't mean you can coach. To be a horse trainer, you didn't first need to be a horse.
What?
So,
man.
I love that analogy, by the way. That's solid.
It's really good.
Sarah, I'm going to kick it over to Sean, get his opinion on this hire, but then you're going to have closing arguments.
All right.
And that's how we do it. So, Mr. O'Brien, you have the floor.
We're starting to see this kind of interesting pattern here of guys coming from an NHL assistant role to an AHL head coaching role, which is strange because usually we see it go the other way around. That's usually a progression up and not kind of this like weird turn backward. But, that's intriguing, but neither here nor there. That's a conversation for an off-season topic, 3 months from now or whatever. As always, though, I'm a bit skeptical when teams hire head coaches who are already with the team in some capacity. I'm not a big fan of the phone call is coming from inside the house. It screams of bad hiring process, and the team didn't really interview anyone outside of that, so I'm always a little bit skeptical. However, I'm willing to let that slide a bit here, as I think Sturm is a good coach, and I'm not privy to the organization's hiring process, so it's at least possible they interviewed other candidates and saw Sturm as the best. And I usually don't give teams that level of a pass, and I understand that in the previous sense, but also I think it's because of my respect for Sturm. I think it's unlikely that they maybe interviewed other people and chose Sturm as the best, but it's not impossible. As far as Sturm in Los Angeles, him running the Kings power play the last 3 seasons has gone not great. However, I think retaining all of the assistant coaches from Ontario should isolate or insulate the Reign power play from any problems that Sturm had running it, as it should be the same people running the special teams. Overall, I think this has the potential to be a hire that works out well for Ontario. I think Sturm is a good coach, and his work elevating the German men's national team as well as their World Juniors teams speaks to his ability to, get the most from what has been a traditionally kind of afterthought team in the international hockey community, as well as, his ability to work with young players in the World Juniors teams that get them to maybe not what we traditionally think of as success, but certainly a better place than where that German team has been in years prior. Yeah, his work on the Kings power play wasn't great, but his other influences on the Kings certainly appear to be positive. He coached the forwards, and their forwards have done a pretty good job of developing and playing within that system. I'd like to have seen more evidence there was a better hiring process that led to this result, but also I realize asking for a little bit more evidence of process is asking for more than we will likely ever be given at the AHL level. Still, Sturm has a solid resume, familiarity with the organization and its players. I think he's a good coach and has experience developing young prospects. All in all, I am cautiously optimistic about this hire, but considering the way that most of these hires across the league are made, me not hating it, I think is actually a pretty good sign for things. Sarah, your thoughts?
Yeah.
I mean, those are all my points exactly. So we're pretty much on the same page there. Sturm came into the Kings organization in 2018, and at the time, Mike Stothers was still the head coach of the Reign. So you kind of got the feeling when the Kings brought him on that they knew other people maybe were sniffing around with Sturm after the Olympics, and that they wanted him. And so they kind of plumped him into a job. This is my speculation. This isn't like inside or not like or whatever. But whenever they decided not to renew Mike Stothers' contract, there was kind of rumblings about, well, do they put Marco Sturm down there? They didn't. But now I think it's a good move. I think that we know that Sturm can be a good bench boss. Like you said, he has gotten that German team to be greater than the sum of its parts, basically. Talks a lot about how he likes working with young prospects and getting guys ready for the next steps, which is exactly where Ontario is. The power play thing. I mean, this is it's like a double gift for the Kings because you get Marco Sturm down there, get him back in a head coaching role. I know everyone had kind of looked at him as, are the Kings bringing him over as a possible next head coach at some point in time? Well, I'd like to see him head coach at the AHL level first before they even consider that. But it also means that if they make a right decision, they can hire a new assistant coach who can run the power play. So it could work out really well for the Kings too. But yeah, I don't hate this. Like you, I would have loved to know a little more transparency about the hiring. Did they look at other people? Did they just go with him? But this had been kind of rumbling for a couple weeks now in the Kings world. So I wasn't surprised to hear it, but I like it. I think it's a good move. It keeps him in the organization. So if he does really pop off as a great head coach, you have him there if you need him in the future, or if there's openings at the NHL in the future, you can bring him back.
And I think there's at least one thing, too, that I just thought of right now as you were talking of so when they hired Wroblewski, the idea that they interviewed Sturm for the job as well. And they ended up deciding to go with Wroblewski. And now, after he leaves after a short tenure there for reasons I'm sure we will never learn, they kind of look back at, all right, what was our process back then? It's like, well, the guy who we would have picked second for that job is literally still here. Do we really need to do any process? And if that was absolutely the case, I would have said, okay, you know what? That's fair. Like, if that's the way it went, which, it may not, I'm wildly speculating here. Like, I would be okay with that if you decide, well, the guy we would have hired second besides Wroblewski is literally still an option. Let's just go with that instead of recanvassing and all of that. But I like Sturm. I think he's going to be a good coach. And I agree with your analysis there. After the Olympics, he was someone that was talked about. He was very much someone who, you heard everyone from all the like traditional NHL insiders on TSN, Bobby Margarita, and everyone just, like Marco Sturm is getting some. Well, if you put Germany to a silver medal, their first medal since the 70s, you're going to get looks. So, and I again cautiously optimistic. I want to think this is going to be a good hire. There are a lot of good signs for it, but again, as I'm always skeptical of the call is coming from inside the house. So. If I ignored that completely, I would say this would be a great hire, but I can't put that out of my head. So
yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, for Sean to even consider an inter-coaching hire for a head coach at the AHL and to say, oh yeah, I don't hate this. It's a vast improvement. As opposed to, say, the McCarthy hire for the Barracuda. He is not a fan of that.
I'm always going to rail against, and I've been wanting to make this point for a while, so this seems like a good space to do it. I'm always against handing guys coaching jobs at any form at the second highest level of hockey in the world. That is the AHL, arguably. And if you look back to the coaches that made the conference finals in the AHL this year, 0 of them were gifted a job at the AHL level to start. They all cut their teeth some other place and worked their way up the ladder. The last 6 of the AHL's Coach of the Year, the A.R. Pieri Award, the last 6 of them cut their teeth somewhere else and had to work their way up to the AHL. So the idea that we're just handing coaching jobs to guys with almost no experience or literally no experience from their playing career to coaching, it doesn't have a good track record. We've seen it before, and yet teams still do it, and that drives me nuts. So the idea that they didn't do this with Marco Sturm, he cut his teeth through probably one of the hardest jobs, coaching Germany internationally to get to where he is. I have a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, no complaints, no notes. Done.
There you go. All right, Sarah. Well, thank you for jumping on for this introductory segment. We will see you a little bit later on the show when we cover the Chicago Wolves and their Calder Cup Finals preview. So thank you. See you then. Well, we have a couple of series postmortems to cover before we jump into our Calder Cup Finals preview. And we initially reached out to Blaine Potvin at the Hockey Writers to follow up on his great analysis from last episode in regards to the Laval Rocket, but unfortunately he was unavailable for recording. He did, however, recommend a fellow Hockey Writers writer to come on the show in his stead, and not only does she write for the Hockey Writers, but she also is the social media and marketing manager for the site, and she covers the QMJHL as well as a writer. So covering the Q, based there in Quebec. And without further ado, we'll bring in Melissa Boyd. Melissa, welcome to the program.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking some time on incredibly short notice to jump in here.
I'm always around. Like I told Blaine, I'm always around when needed.
All right, Cece, let's get to it. Run me down some games, and then we'll cover picks very quickly because we don't need to dwell on that.
No, we do not. But let's recap, very, very brief recaps of all 7 games here. Game 1, Saturday, June 4th in Springfield. 2-1 Thunderbirds beat the Rocket in overtime. Game 2, Sunday, June 5th. Quick turnaround there in Springfield, Massachusetts. Laval taking the victory 4-2 in the second game. Game 3, Wednesday, June 8th, Springfield bouncing back, 6-3 victory over Laval. Game 4, Friday, June 10th, Laval taking it 3-2 in overtime. We keep going back and forth here. I'm sensing a little bit of a pattern. Is it going to hold up? Game 5, Saturday, June 11th, Springfield getting the win 3-2 over Laval in overtime. Game 6, Monday, June 13th. Springfield won the last one. Who's going to win this one? Laval, 5-1 over Springfield. Game 7, Wednesday, June 15th. The deciding game, winner take all, Springfield shutting out Laval 4-0 in the Thunderdome. And that would do it. Best of 7 series going to the Springfield Thunderbirds. Sean, we have some picks, but like you said, let's go over these quickly because reasons.
Yeah. So, Cece, you said Laval had a ton of momentum coming into the Eastern Conference Final. Thought it was going to be a close series that goes the distance, but in the end, you said it was the rocket blasting off again. You took Laval. I said getting Callie Rosen back is a nice boost for Springfield, but I think Laval has too much going for it at the moment. They're the faster team top to bottom, and I believed more in the body of work in Caden Premu than I did in Lindgren and Hofer at that point in the playoffs. I said it went at least 6 games, but I also went Laval. The model had Laval as a 54.8% favorite in the series, so all three of us on the same side. That did not go in our favor, but at least to our credit, both you and I said close fought series going to go at least 6 games. So it's not like we were like, Springfield has no chance. How did they even get here? That was not our analysis, but
No.
Let's dive into what happened here. We're going to, talk about what we thought, and then we'll kick it over to you, Melissa. For number one, for me, injuries definitely hurt Laval. No pun intended. Jesse Ullinen played one of the final 6 periods of the series. He's one of their better forwards. Even if he was not exactly, lighting up the score sheet, he still was an impact player for them. I saw the hit that put him out. I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't think it merited a penalty, but was definitely a bump from behind. It seemed innocuous enough at the time, but for whatever reason, concussions or whatever happened or a weird thing. Nate Schnarr also missing the last 3 games of the series. That's not going to do it for you. That's 2 important forwards for your roster that you're replacing with guys who would probably be in the press box. Otherwise, that will always drag you down. When that got plugged into the model, Springfield then jumped in front as the favorites. Second big thing here, Springfield was able to physically dominate Laval. They were winning battles along the boards at the net front. It seemed like every loose puck, it was Springfield winning the battle to it. Laval was by far getting hit more than it was laying hits. That took a toll on them, where they looked tired in the later games of the series, especially game 6 and game 7, where they just looked exhausted. 5-on-5, I thought the defense for Laval was incredibly sloppy, executing breakouts, especially in the latter half of the series. They made a lot of turnovers on dump and recoveries, screwed up a lot of controlled breakouts. It really kept Laval from using its speed through the neutral zone because they couldn't complete a controlled zone exit, it seemed like, to save their lives. The power play too, big problem. They was not making Springfield pay for the penalties that they did get called. I won't deny the officiating in the series was at best inconsistent. I think that every one of the 4 teams in the Eastern Conference Final, their fan bases decried the officiating at one point or the other. And not to say that they, weren't accurate in their beliefs, but it was bad, I think, in all parts. And the part that was the most frustrating was the inconsistency of it, where what was a penalty in the first period, or kind of a let them play mentality, didn't carry through to the rest of the game. That being said, though, when Laval went to the power play, they did not make Springfield pay for those moments. They went 3 for 18 in the series. Their net power play for the series was 11.1%. Shockingly not helpful in their efforts to win the series. That's what I saw from the series. Melissa, what did you see as to how Laval ended up here and us giving them, their eulogy for the season?
Yeah, I think you covered the main points really well there. I think that pretty much is the crux of it. As you were saying about maybe Springfield was not effective on the power play, but I think the fact also that they had so many power plays and forced Laval to play shorthanded so often, I think got to them eventually. And it allowed them to keep their rhythm, gain rhythm when they didn't have it at 5-on-5. And I think, you mentioned the fatigue factor, and I think that contributed to it, is that, their penalty killers were getting far too much ice time, and it can just be exhausting, playing, having that pressure to kill those off. So I think that was a factor as well. And I think, they just weren't sharp. You were talking about the breakout passes and zone exits and even zone entries. Like, I just didn't find they were as sharp as they were in the previous rounds. Just a little bit. Yeah. I think it was fatigue all around, just, errors that they weren't making before, mental errors. So, but there's, I'm a positive person, so I'll say there was a lot of positives to take, even though they lost. This was a really important postseason run for the franchise. It's a young franchise, as everyone knows, and it was really, really important. And I think it's just a start of something. And they'll definitely be a team to watch next season as well.
Especially too, with the big shift away from Joël Bouchard last year, who seemed to finally find his stride with that team and find the right players to plug in. Joël Bouchard was our coach of the year last year. And as much as I respect him as a coach, he definitely seems to need his guys in order to be successful. It seemed like last year he finally found that rhythm. And then this year, bringing in a brand new coach, the big shock of the offseason is letting Joël Bouchard leave and bringing in what I still thought was a good hire at the time, and still believe in JF Houle. But just surprising to see him carry what is a very similar roster, but in a manner that was not quite the same as Joël Bouchard to a good amount of success. But I definitely think too, also the injuries that they faced for Laval that weren't necessarily in the playoffs, but Matthias Norlinder was a playoff injury on a cheap shot by a player we're not going to talk about. But like that, he would have been a huge help. So then you don't have to play we don't have to play Fairbrother as your seventh defenseman, who I was particularly not impressed with. But in terms of the series as a whole, a lot of guys where I wouldn't be shocked if, and we don't get these kind of injury reports of the AHL after a series is over, where it's like in the NHL, like, oh yeah, that guy had 2 punctured lungs, 3 broken metatarsals, and shingles. Whereas like it wouldn't surprise me if later, months from now, it came out that like Joel Teasdale had off-season surgery to correct something, as he looked just not right in this series, not the usual level of intensity I'm used to seeing from him. Kevin Waugh, another one too, where it seems like all season, I thought after last year where he led Tucson in scoring, that he would come into Laval and just be, a homecoming for him, a breath of fresh air, and he would be a point-a-game player. And he never lived up to that during the regular season. I thought, well, maybe the playoffs, it's switch flipping time, and still no, wasn't even the best Waugh on the team, arguably. And that's just kind of a head scratcher for me too. What are your thoughts there?
Well, you mentioned them. I also think it's worth mentioning Lucas Vaidemo as well, who went out in the regular season. That was a big loss as well. He's a important piece to that team, and big face, good face-off guy, plays in all situations. One of those guys you can always count on. So that was a big loss as well. I think he would have been super helpful in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, it just. And they had to really fight to get into the playoffs. They had to win their last games, and it was a battle all season. And they battled injury all season, players in and out of the lineup, because the ECHL affiliate Trois-Rivières had so many injuries, and it was just it was just a crazy sort of roster manipulation that had to happen almost every day to have enough players to suit up. And then the Canadians, if you remember, at Christmas time could barely ice a roster. So that basically meant that the entire Rocket team was up with the Canadians. And so they were, hiring guys on, so I think all in all, it was a really challenging season for them. And I'm glad you mentioned JF, because I don't think he gets enough credit for the job he did this season. He came in a not an ideal situation, because like you said, letting Joël Bouchard go was not well received. Understandably, they couldn't understand why he was making like a lateral move, and what did they do? What did something happen? So there was a lot of pressure on JF to come in and sort of continue what Joel has started. He's the son of Régent Hull, all those things. And you know what? I was so impressed with his demeanor, the way he handled every situation. Like with the media, he was, he was so good. Like he never, it was just always positive, and we're going to go to work. And no matter what he had at his disposal, he just made it work. You said the way he had them playing, like everybody just would, slot in and, next guy up. And, so I think, I think, it was just a hard season, and just by game 7, they didn't have anything left, unfortunately, to give. So
one thing that Cece brought up on our last episode, and I realized I needed to clarify because I did not give him a lot of context for this, is because I was on my honeymoon in Jamaica and didn't see a lot of the series live. But I sent out a tweet from the beachside that I was at, already a handful of drinks deep, but one that said just thoughts from AHL thoughts from Jamaica. Oh my God, Kevin Poulin should start game 2 for the Laval Rocket. And when Cece brought that up to Blaine, he was like, no, I like those goals weren't Primu's fault, that kind of thing. And to clarify, because I realized I gave absolutely no context for why I think that.
No, you did not.
You just put that out in the universe.
Yeah,
yes, you did.
It necessarily wasn't about that the goals in game 1 were Primu's fault, or that he hadn't played well or anything like that. But it was more of, it was a time in which like you had a back-to-back, you had 2 back-to-backs in the series. And I understand, usually it's you ride your starter until he falters and then you see what the other guy can do. And a lot of that is because, well, your backup is the backup for a reason. He sucks. He's not usually the same caliber goaltender your starter is. But Kevin Poulin is a very good goaltender. He was our goaltender of the year and probably put Laval single-handedly into the postseason. Like, I understand he played 1 game in the Syracuse series. He wasn't very good. But, like, I also think watching Caden Primeau in game 7, like, he looked a little bit tired. And I wonder if some of that was you played him in 2 back-to-backs in this series and basically a 3 and 4 at the end. Like, was that necessarily the right move in your mind? Because in my mind, I played Kevin Poulin in game 2 for sure, and then game 5 for sure, because those are back-to-backs, and I want to give Primeau rest while also recognizing Poulin's capable of holding down the fort on his own. Like, this isn't me throwing a game away because I feel the need to play an inferior goaltender. This is, a 1A, 1B for me. Melissa, what are your thoughts there?
Well, and I think if I'm not mistaken, maybe I am, but I think one of the back-to-backs was like an evening game, and then they played the following afternoon, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe that's
right.
correct.
Yeah.
I don't have the times in front of me, but looking at Saturday to Sunday from game 1 to 2.
So it did, to be honest, it did kind of cross my mind, and I thought, I wonder if they will make a switch at some point. I mean, it's tough because, I don't know. Like, I would have considered it for sure if I was the coach. I would have thought hard about it. But then at the same time, like, I don't know if you guys are, I'm sure you are aware of what this market is like, but if they had taken Primeau out and put Poulin in and then Poulin lost, it would have been like, pretty suicidal, sort of his suicide there for JF, I think. But I think he just rode the hot hand and was like, this is my guy, and this is what I'm gonna win or lose with him, and I'm fine with that. I think I know at that point in a postseason, you're just thinking about winning too, but it was an important, really, really important playoff run for Caden Primeau, because there were a lot of question marks surrounding him. They weren't sure. So I think there was that in there too. It was like, you know what, just let the kid go and we'll see what he's got. And but I'm surprised. I am. I thought for sure that back-to-back, I thought there's a good possibility, but.
And I think too, it's one of those where it's like you said that, like, he would paint himself into a bad corner there if he puts Poulin in and he loses. But I think at the same point, like, we're asking the question for the exact same reason. He didn't put Poulin in and they lost one of those back-to-backs. And now we're like, well, what if you would have put, like, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. And I think At least for my money, if I, I will never be an AHL head coach. I'm very, very confident in that. But if it was for me and, I had to be asked the questions afterward of like, why did you sit your goaltender? I'd be like, it's a back-to-back. It's, I would rather put in a fresh goaltender, and I believe in Kevin and have every right to, and would rather put him in fresh than, risk Caden playing, a game that went to overtime the night before. In a second game, 24 hours or less later, like, yes, I still believe in Caden. He's going to start, game 3 or game 7 or whatever, but this was a matter of, not putting in a tired goaltender in a situation where I needed him to perform at his best, and he clearly wasn't going to be there. And that's nothing against him.
Mm-hmm. And actually, if I'm thinking back now, like, it wasn't even a question that was asked by the media. Like, it didn't even come up. Like, are you thinking about, it's back to back, the game the night before went to overtime. Like, it never ever came up. So that sort of tells you kind of like where it was at. So, which is, I just thought of that now as you were speaking. Yeah. It never even came up. Like, he never even had to answer to that. Like, never had to explain his decision. Yeah.
If it's anything like me, when I'm in the press scrum for the Colorado Eagles up in Loveland, and I'm asking Greg Cronin saying, hey, are you going to go with Eustace and Noonan for the playoffs? Or are you going to go with Hunter Miska? And then I pause and I go, or is that a Peter Budaj question? Because he's the goalie coach for the Eagles. And he goes, it's a Budaj question. He's like, come on. And he just walks off. So maybe they're trained.
I think that's fair too. And we talked about this a long time ago in Syracuse with Alex Ackerman, where it was like, there are a surprising number of head coaches that, like, the goalie decisions are not theirs. They're like, whatever the goalie coach tells me, unless the head coach was a goalie, oftentimes they're just like, they just defer to whatever the goalie coach tells them. Cause it's like, the goalies are a different breed of human being. I don't even know if they technically count as hockey players. So like, I manage the guys who wear normal people skates. I let the guy who deals with them tell me what to do. Like, if he tells me that's the starter for the day, that's the starter for the day. So like, that also could be the case here with JF Houle. We don't know how that power struggle works, but there are definitely a fair number of teams where the head coach is just like, yeah, whatever goalie coach guy tells me that the crazy people are doing that day, that's what we're going with. And that's how it's going to be settled. If I'm not mistaken, I think Montreal, at least when Ducharme was there, that was their setup, is whatever the goalie coach tells me is what I'm going to do. And I know that he's not alone in that. So it wouldn't shock me too if that was a Laval goalie coach decision. Although at the same point, I still say I think of all of the things that went wrong for Laval, I think that one's the only one I can really pin on the coaching staff of. That would have been a decision I think they should have, if nothing else, at least weighed a little bit more. But the fact that they weren't asked about it too is mildly surprising, especially given, we've seen tandems in Springfield and in Chicago be really successful. And I'm sure if Stockton could have played a second goaltender that was in the neighborhood of Dustin Wolf, then they probably would have too, but they didn't have that luxury, unfortunately.
And actually, they, here that we were all surprised that Springfield started Lindgren in Game 7. Everyone thought it was going to be Hofer, just because he had been, just a bit better through the series. But again, I think it came down to, he was fresh, and Charlie Lindgren has played a lot of big games in his career, and obviously against his former team too. So, so.
Oh, I'm sure revenge was a factor. I don't know if you saw our Twitter feed today, but we made a lovely meme about it here. I will share that with you now here in case you.
I was going to say you need. To
I didn't see it. So
here we go.
Oh man.
Yeah. So
what was the caption of that photo, Sean?
What's that?
What's the caption of that photo?
Oh, it was revenge is a dish best served with sideburns. Yeah.
Yes.
So that I definitely think played at least some small role in him getting the Game 7 start. And I mean, Hofer's played very well throughout the playoffs, to my complete surprise. Like, he did not play that great in the regular season, even though, I respect Drew Bannister's decision to kind of, just continue to keep going back to him. So he's got the confidence that if he screws up, he can, he's not losing his starting job, isn't going to miss playing time, which is a young goalie is important. I think it's important for you to battle through the problems you have, in live fire exercises. But it was surprising a little bit to see Lindgren, because almost it seems like I forgot that he played for Laval just because he didn't play that much for them. Mm-hmm. And at the same point, 2021 feels like it was 30 years ago at this point. Right?
It's so true. Yeah,
it really does. It feels like I remember someone pointed out that Tampa won the cup in the bubble, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
Bubble.
That feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
So much has
the
happened.
Stars. Dallas made the Cup final. What?
Yeah.
Well, Melissa, to finish up here, we are going to run down the Montreal organization, Laval players that are still under contract, those that are unrestricted free agents, and then those that are restricted free agents. And I'm going to start this off. Sean's going to finish it up with the free agents, and then we'll kind of open the floor and say, okay, which of these free agents, which of these guys do you expect are going to come back, and which of these guys do you expect are going to go for greener pastures, at least in their eyes? So let's start with those that are under contract. And I think it's worth mentioning we are skipping the normal part for our post-mortem where we say, hey, was the season a success? Was it a season of failure? I think it's pretty obvious for all parties involved and those any other observers on the outside that Laval's season was a resounding success. So we're just going to go ahead and jump over that. Yep, we're good.
Nothing to see here.
Moving along. Nothing to see here. So let's talk about the players that are under contract, and it's a very small handful for next season. So Jesse Ullinen, Raphael Arve-Pinard, forgive my French pronunciations because it's not my second language. Spanish is my second language. So Lucas Condata, Cameron Hillis, Matthias Norlinder, and like you mentioned earlier, Gianni Fairbrother. So those are the only 6 that are projected to make Laval, or supposedly. And then we've got our free agents. So Sean, who do we got in the unrestricted pool?
In the unrestricted pool, Laurent Dauphin, Alex Belzile, Jean-Sébastien Day, Cedric Paquette, Lucas Vedemo, Louis Belpedio, Sammy Niku, Xavier Ouellette, Kevin Poulin, Terrence Amorosa, Tori Dello, Toby Paquette-Bisson, Peter Abandonado, JC Baudin, Gabriel Bork, Brandon Gignac, Danik Martel, Kevin Waugh, Devontae Smith-Pelly.
All in one breath.
Yep.
Well done.
In the restricted free agent side, we have Joel Teasdale, Nate Schnarr, Josh Brook, Corey Schooneman, and Caden Primo. Now, obviously, Caden Primo is getting qualified. He will be back. There is no way that he gets. I mean, he might get offer sheeted, but Montreal will match. Unless someone is going to lose their minds and hit like the first round pick offer sheet levels, which no one will do because hockey GMs are cowards. That we're going to see Caden Primo come back. I'm pretty sure of the RFAs. The only one I could see them walking away from is Josh Brook. Yeah. I think he still gets a QO. They keep him around for another 1 year, 2-way, $800,000 or some similar kind of just, if it doesn't work out, we've thrown away dumber money kind of thing. Some low stakes, low risk, low reward kind of deal. But I could also see them letting Josh Brook walk. Everyone else, I think, on the RFAs is coming back. The UFA list, which is a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. That's what she said. I think, I could see Kevin Poulin walking. I think he's established himself enough this season to be able to walk into just about any AHL locker room and get at least, half season's worth of games started. If he doesn't want to stay in Laval, which, he's from the region, I could see him wanting to stick around, but I could also see him, seeing Caden Primo, who might be, dominating starts next season, and see the writing on the wall, not wanting to go back to the ECHL and seeing if there are greener pastures elsewhere in Canada. Everyone else, I think Xavier Ouellette comes back. This is the only home he's ever known. It would shock me to see him leave. He's been the captain there for a while. a lot of the other French Canadian guys, I'm just assuming, are sticking around for the most part. The only one I could see leave is Kevin Waugh, just because I thought this would be a huge season for him, and it wasn't. And I could see him maybe trying to find his game back somewhere else. Everyone else, though, I could see going either way. Melissa, your thoughts. If you need me to read the giant list again, we can do that.
Okay. I think I got it. For the RFAs, I'm fairly confident that they will let Josh Brook walk. I don't think he'll be qualified. I think also it's hard to predict what's going to happen, because don't forget there's an entire new management team in Montreal. And this is not their team. They did not build this team. It was Marc Bergevin and Scott Millenby who brought in all these local players, actually. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do, because they have no attachment to these players whatsoever, these UFAs specifically. Also, the Canadians right now don't have a ton of room in terms of the number of contracts they can give out. I think they're already at, if I remember, I think they're already at something like 33 contracts.
Oh, wow.
Of 50. So it's going to be, I think there are some players that will need to be sacrificed, unfortunately. I agree. I think Xavier Ouellet will be back. I think there's a strong chance Belzile will be back. I don't know if you listed Danick Martel. I don't remember if he was.
Yeah, Martel.
He was on a AHL ECHL contract, so
yep.
He might get upgraded to a two-way AHL NHL deal, potentially, because he was really, really good for Laval this season. And to be honest, for me personally, I would rather keep a guy like that who's a bit younger, but also kind of a young veteran to stick around. Like, I would rather see someone like that stick around as opposed to maybe an older veteran. I think Belpedio they will bring back. I think they really appreciated what he brought in his leadership as well. But I think everyone else, I'm not sure. I think it's their postmortem was yesterday. And listening to them talk, like, they're not very confident that they're going to be back. Even like JS Day and even Alex Belzile was like, I don't know, like, new management, we don't know, like, we haven't really discussed or and also there's a lot of Montreal's prospects that are going to be graduating to the pros next year. So Caden Gooley, Matisse Norlander is already there. So yeah, it's a puzzle for this offseason. It's going to actually be really interesting to follow, because there's a lot there. Like you said, I can't believe how many UFAs there are.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of crazy. So, and the fact, and the fact that none of them have been re-signed yet makes me wonder, because if I remember in previous years, they'd already locked up Belzile for the following year, and they'd already locked up Ouellet, and so I don't know, are they just waiting to see? So
I'm imagining that's a new a new management thing of we want to take the off season to evaluate. We're not being rushed. Also, they have important draft things to do, and that's probably their focus right now.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Also, I think also you were talking about Ylonen and Harvey Pinard. I actually think there's a decent chance that they start the year in Montreal, given Montreal's roster situation. So they will need bodies. So, and they saw, we saw this year how many bodies they actually needed. So it just depends, but like I said, they are tight against the number of contracts that they have already. So some players are going to have to, I think, make a sacrifice if they want to stay. You're going to have to come in on an AHL contract if you want to stay. And so it'll be interesting to see. Oh, and they also brought back Otto Leskinen. So that takes one.
Which I was surprised by. I thought when he left, that was going to be happy trails for him which I was surprised by too, is I'm like, Otto Leskinen's very good.
He is very good.
Who does a lot of, small things well. Yep. And I was surprised to see him walk, and then next season come right back. That was I would have bet heavily against that. I will say there is one.
It was the announcement came in. I was like, huh?
Yeah, that would have been someone we could have used during this run, but okay, sure. I will say there is definitely one person on the UFA list where I'm like, there's no way he comes back. That's Cedric Paquette.
No,
There is no way.
Yeah.
Like,
No.
I don't
No.
think he's in the plans for the Canadians, and
No.
he definitely has NHL life left to give. And there will be a team that is absolutely willing to give him a 3x3, contract to let him play in the bottom six. Like he will. I cannot imagine a world in which Montreal retains his services, not because they don't like him, but because someone will offer him way more money than Montreal will. So
I have my local market bias theory here, and stick with me. So, of course, the Canadiens and the Avalanche have some sort of weird goalie exchange over a period of time. Of course, starting with Patrick Waugh. You've got Jose Theodore. Sean's heard this before. Peter Budaj, Stefan Fisset, only 2 games with the Habs, but it still counts. But Kevin Poulin, if Hunter Miska doesn't come back to the Eagles, we're going to bump that weird trade exchange down to the AHL. Poulin goes to the Eagles, and he brings former ECHL Colorado Eagles, Alex Belzile, and JC Bodin with him, and they all sign in Colorado next season. That's my philosophy. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, maybe not.
okay, well.
Actually, I thought of it too while you were talking about the goaltending. Don't forget also in Montreal, there's Sam Montembeault, who they will probably re-sign. So if Carey Price is healthy, that's a big if, of course, then Montembeault becomes number 3. So Montembeault is probably going to be, if Price is healthy, will be probably start the year in the AHL. So then that knocks Poulin down 1. So yeah, it's a big puzzle.
Lots of moving parts.
Yeah, it's like, oh boy. So yeah, I think it could be. I think we're going to be surprised, is what I'm going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance too that like you see a lot of kind of the depth guys, the Terrence Amorosas, the Tori Dellos, the Toby Paquette-Bissons. I don't think a lot of those kind of, maybe not them specifically, but like, I don't think a lot of the guys that are in that neighborhood come back. Devontae Smith-Pelly, I don't think comes back. But like, I could see Louis Belpedio walking too.
Because he might get a better offer.
I think a lot of it is going to be, this is the one off season that we can kind of see ahead where it's like, we already know Arizona's, in general patent tank mode. They are not going to be competitive next year, but they need players to come in and fill that roster. And I think they could make a lot of attractive offers to guys who are just basically like, hey, dude, you like an NHL paycheck and shame? Like, we'll give it to you, but like you'll get 6 figures playing in front of a crowd smaller than anything you did in Laval. Plus you'll get the crap beat out of you, 80% of the nights you play, but it will be a good, a hefty raise for you. So like,
they already did that with your cousin Liam.
Well, Liam went there, but then he went to Colorado and managed to at least, he went to Colorado first and then went to Arizona.
Yeah,
that's
correct.
Sorry,
Sorry,
cousin Liam. But he cashed NHL paychecks all year, and I think we're going to see some interesting turns with guys like that. Because there are a couple of teams, it's not just Arizona where it's like you are going to be bad next year, and I think we all tacitly acknowledge like they're going to be bad. Columbus is going to be bad. Ottawa's still going to be bad. And while I think Columbus and Ottawa are going to be a little more competitive, Arizona is very clearly like, nope, we're just going to skip right to the end.
Yeah, it's, they actually tried to be bad this year and tank.
Oh, yeah.
And poor them didn't get the number 1 pick. So
can't even tank right.
They can't even tank right. Come on.
Sand gets in the gears. It doesn't go.
It's like, what are you doing winning your last 2 games? Come on.
Sand. I hate sand. It gets everywhere. It's uncomfortable.
Closing thoughts here on Laval. Melissa, we'll let you go ahead and go first here.
Well, like you said, it was a really great success this season. The team really took another step, which was necessary, I think. And I think that the playoff run will entirely rejuvenate the franchise fan base as well. It'll put more butts in seats during the regular season. Laval, I've been to several games in Laval. I mean, it's great. It's so much fun. The atmosphere is great. The layout of the arena is great. It's brand new. It was great too that it happened sort of the year after the Canadian Stanley Cup final run, because it was really missing from the province this year, and so that the Laval was able to fill that void was great for them. And I think it's the start of something. Like I said, they're going to be their lineup is going to be injected with a lot of youth, a lot of talent next season. And I think what they built this year in terms of, the locker around the locker room, I think is going to carry over, and it's going to help those kids coming in. And yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be, I think it'll be even better next year.
I think for me, the biggest thing that stands out in my mind is the atmosphere that they created around that playoff run. Like, I remember when they posted the video that they filmed, like during the opening not ceremony, but like their pregame show, and I was blown away. I was like, if I had to play against Laval in that arena and I was on the opposing team, I'd be crapping my pants right now after seeing that. Like, they evoked like just these haunting vibes as a player going on the other side, to the point where like it felt terrifying. Like, I remember when the lights come up and you just see the whiteout, and I was like, Jesus, like that is a memory that is going to stick with me for a long time, because for me, that's the peak of AHL environment right there. And I wanted them to go to the Calder Cup Finals. If for nothing else, I wanted that environment to have the biggest stage in the AHL that could possibly give them. And I'm kind of sad that it didn't get there, because that atmosphere, that intro, that just, it very much was on another level that you don't see. And I think for the fans to be able to bring that energy to the building and to put on that kind of show is something that Laval should be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Don't forget the violinist.
Oh, absolutely not. Like, that added to it. Like,
oh yeah.
I don't know. I know that I don't think either of you are big MMA fans, but I remember back in the day when Anderson the Spider Silva was just terrorized the UFC, and his walkout song was "Ain't No Sunshine," and it was just haunting. Like, every time you heard it, it was like you knew, even if it wasn't like this hyped up in your face, like aggressive song, it just had this haunting vibe. And that's what Laval's intro did. It was like, it was terrifying in the sense that it felt like you were about to go face death. And like, they absolutely captured the spirit of it. It was beautiful. Like, I know that that's obviously not a sustainable level of production for 72 regular season games, but man, what an environment that was.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you, I think too, like it showed just how important it is for the development of the players. Like, if you're the Canadians looking at that, you're like, yeah, this is what I want for my up and coming players, my Eulonians, my Primos, and that, like, that's what I want. That's the kind of experience I want them to have. That's the kind of experience I want them to get, because it's going to prepare them for, the big show. And when you were talking about the atmosphere, I was thinking too, what got me every time, chills for me every time, is the player intros. And when it got to Caden Primo, it was like number 31, who is also number 31 in Montreal. Caden, and you're just like, and the way he just stood there, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like this is getting to me, like, wow.
Yeah.
I think for me, speaking of Caden Primo too, like, I have not been, there are a lot of people who have been for the last 3 years all aboard the Caden Primo hype train, and I have not been one of them. I very much
understand.
Like, I very much have seen where, like, a lot of the times everyone's just, and not so much like, like I see stuff from Scott Wheeler and that group where, like, they thought he was good, but they didn't seem to carry quite the same hype that the Montreal fan base did, where they thought he was basically the second coming of peak Carey Price. And at every moment, I was just like, I don't see it. Like, don't get me wrong, he's been good, but he never felt like he did enough right. It wasn't so much that he would do things wrong. It was that he didn't do enough right. He didn't make the big saves necessarily when they needed them. And this playoff very much, again, I'm trying not to put too much into it because it's a very small sample size. And I've seen this movie before with other goaltenders where suddenly they're shining in the playoffs and they're here. And then next season comes around and well, they're just an average goaltender again. So I don't know if that's going to be what we see from Caden Primo. I always root for players. So I hope that he's able to build on this and fulfill the, giant train of hype that's, going on 30 cars deep at this point that's gotten him to here, because he definitely very much reinvigorated a lot of hope that he is the next big goaltender in Montreal. I don't know if he fulfills that, coming into next season, but I will say I have hope for him. And this playoff run definitely put that hope back into me where it had been absent in prior years.
Yeah, I don't think he's not gonna be the next Carey Price. Like, let's put that to rest right now. But I mean, I think right now is, what the hope is for the fan base, for everyone, is kind of that he becomes a solid NHL goaltender, that he becomes, say 1B goaltender. I think everyone would be perfectly fine with that. So yeah, but it was nice to see, because he had a really tough year, and his confidence was as low as it's ever been, and for him to come up like that, and just to see also how much fun he had and how he embraced it, and it was really, like you said, I was just really happy for him, because he's a good kid. He's a really good kid. So
all right, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on. That is all we have to talk about here for Laval. We've been here for quite a bit, so it's time that we finally say, au revoir to Laval and their season. Just please, before you go, where can the people find your work?
Yeah, so thehockeywriters.com, in the Canadian section, we're a team of 4 writers. We're the great guys that I work with. So yeah, check out thehockeywriters.com. We're on social everywhere as well. And you can follow me on Twitter if you like to, at Boydmel. So BOYDMEL.
All right, Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time with us, especially on short notice here. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Melissa. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. À la prochaine.
I don't speak enough French for that. My French is incredibly limited to like a handful
I
of
even
random
pulled that
words,
off.
and
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to take a break here. After the break, we will get to Stockton's postmortem. If you're just here for Laval's postmortem, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from, so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. Links to our social media and more can be found at our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. We're going to run some ads, pay some bills. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Alrighty, we've covered the Eastern Conference Final, and now we're heading on over to the Western Conference Final, the Chicago Wolves against the Stockton Heat. And this one went 6 games. I had Sarah Avampato on here when Chicago was up 3-0 in the series, and Stockton clawing, scratching, making it more of a series than I thought it was going to be at that point with Sarah just a week or so ago. So let's run that down real quick, Sean. And game 1, Chicago 5, Stockton 4 in overtime. Game 2, Chicago 3, Stockton 2. And those 2 games were in Rosemont, Illinois. Game 3, heading over to Stockton, California. Chicago 3, Stockton 0. Alex Lyon with the shutout there. Game number 4, Stockton 4, Chicago 3. Again, overtime, scratching, clawing. Game 5, Stockton 3, Chicago 2. Overtime, 2 overtimes in a row. And then in game 6, Chicago 3-0 with the shutout, closing out the series and going to the 2022 Calder Cup Final. So without further ado, I'm just leaving.
You're Matt Damoning the crap out of it. Jeez. That's a new record. We made it 1 minute and 30 seconds before. Oh my God.
Well, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you say stop?
You were going right into it. No. This is on you now. You're not editing this out. Introduce our guest.
Gosh. All right. Well, from Full Press Hockey, covers the Stockton Heat, soon to be Calgary Heat, Calgary something or other next season. Paige, I'm sorry, I got on a roll.
That's okay. I was just letting you, do your thing.
I have no words, Sean. I
leave for 1 week and it's already.
I did fine while you were gone, and then you come back and I'm all out of sorts. Well, All right, Paige, we're going to talk about the picks of the series and everything like that. I said Stockton didn't just beat Colorado in 4 games the last series they played in the divisional final, but they had 3 shutouts against a solid offensive team, the Eagles. Head coach Mitch Love, he had just been given AHL Coach of the Year, and now he had my call for coronation as the king of strategic compensation. That's a mouthful. And I said Heat in 5. I said the Heat were going to, that's almost as bad as saying Ontario was going to lose to San Diego in the first round. Sean with a very poor pick. I won't let him live that down. But Sean said Calgary getting bounced in the Battle of Alberta. It made all the difference. And before that, he was going to pick Chicago for a reasonably close series. Stockton getting a top 10 forward in Ruzicka, a number 1 defense in Connor Mackey, and a steady second pair defenseman in Valimaki. And he thought it was going to tip the scales in Stockton's favor, and he was going to go with the Heat as well. The model agreed. So you had the 3 sweep, which of course tends to be the death knell for a lot of teams. And Stockton 52.1% favorite in the series. And there was it was pretty eventful. So Sean, Paige, I'm going to yield the floor to you two and telling us what exactly happened in these for me, 6 games. Go ahead.
For me, what happened here is if you would have told me at the beginning when we were previewing the series, because I thought Adam Ruzicka coming back was going to be this huge deal. Before he left, he looked like a world beater, and he looked great last season. So this was not an out of nowhere, maybe this is over, shooting a small sample size. I thought that was legitimate, and he did not look good in the 1 game he played in the Colorado series, but he had been off for some time. He hadn't been playing as much in Calgary. And even when he was getting kind of crappy minutes because Daryl Sutter loves him, some older guys. But I was expecting him to come in, maybe take a game or 2 to kind of get back to the speed and pace of it after a month off, and then just, rip the series apart and be the star player that I'm pretty confident that he is. And he played 1 game in this series, and he did not look great in that 1 game. And then we didn't see him again, and there was no comment from anyone about what happened. So I feel very confident that they did not just healthy scratch Adam Ruzicka from this series. But yeah, if you tell me Adam Ruzicka doesn't play in this, plays 1 completely irrelevant game in this series, I take Chicago to win. That very much flips a lot of everything for me. That the model takes Chicago in there. I take Chicago in there, although I still think it's a close series, and I feel like that's what we got. We had 3 games go to overtime. Game 2, was 30 seconds away, 18 seconds away, I think it was, from overtime. So we had a very, very close series. Even the game 6 being 3-0, I don't feel like that tells the story of the game. That was a goaltending duel and a wild one for 2.5 periods. And the goal that Chicago scored initially was a defensive breakdown that, if Dustin Wolf makes that save, I'm actually pretty sure he may beat Dominik Hasek. But it was a very tightly contested game until the end where, Stockton had to take chances to get back in the game. And when you take big risks like that, sometimes they come back to burn you, because it doesn't matter if you lose 1-0 or 10-0, losing is losing in that spot. So, but Adam Ruzicka not being in, 5 out of 6 games this series is a huge factor for what happened here to Stockton. Secondly, we said that in the preview, if Stockton wins, because their special team made noise, and they made noise, but not in a positive way. They took a lot of bad penalties, and took bad penalties that caused them to blow leads in games 1 and 2. 3-1 lead in game 1, 2 power play goals for Chicago allow them to rally. Wolves win in overtime. 2-1 lead in game 2, power play goal by Noah Gunler ties it at 2. Wolves win with a goal with 18 seconds left in regulation. Overall, the Heat's net penalty kill in the series was 77.3%. That's never going to be good enough to get the job done unless you take exactly 5 penalties in the whole series. But this was the team that was the number 1 in net penalty kill in the AHL in the regular season with 91.8%. Headed into the series, they were down a little bit, but still very respectable. 7th out of 23 playoff teams with an 85% net penalty kill. 77.3 net penalty kill for the series is just shocking. What makes it worse is the power play had a net power play percentage of 0, nix, nil, nada. They were 1 for 26, and they gave up a shorthanded goal, which makes the net of 0. That's how net power play and penalty kill work. Shorthanded goals, cancel one out. So that will never do you any good to have that bad of a penalty kill and to not be able to do anything on the multiple opportunities they had, especially in key moments where they were going to a power play, down a goal or tied or needing to put more distance between them, and they just never could make that work. The last thing for me, we said in the preview, like we kind of just assumed Stockton was going to take away the big three from Chicago. Like they were going to not be, go 0 for the series, but we thought Podorowski, Nason, and Drury would be guys that were very much kept under wraps by Stockton because that's what they had done the entire, playoffs to that point. They took away the big guns from the previous teams. They took away Kiefer Sherwood and I'm blanking on names. CC, give me the name of the other top guy in Colorado. Kiefer Sherwood and Dylan Sekura. Dylan Sekura. They took away Sherwood and Sekura from Colorado. They did the same thing with in Bakersfield. They took away Seth Griffith and Cooper Marody, and they did not get to do that in Chicago, taking away the big three. The Podorowski had 3 primary points in the season. Nason had 7. Drury had 5 primary points. It's 15 combined primary points. They were still a big driver of why this. All that is basically just to say a lot went wrong for Stockton here. This is probably the first, 6-game stretch of the season in which it looked like they didn't have answers to tough questions. And unfortunately, in the playoffs, that's all you get. You only get a handful of chances to, make mistakes, and then you find out. Paige, what did you see from Stockton this series? How are we saying goodbye to them?
Well, back to the Adam Ruzicka thing. There really, you make a good point. There really wasn't any confirmation. There wasn't any public knowledge shared about what was going on. Through the regular season, you see the injury updates before every game, and that just didn't happen with him. I didn't go back and look, but based off kind of the lack of information we got and the playoffs, I'm pretty heavily leaning towards there was some sort of injury that occurred either in the game or outside the game that prevented him from playing. He's a gamer. He's going to play if he's able to, even if it's kind of a nagging injury that, once the end of the season hits, you're like, oh my gosh, he played with 3 broken ribs. Like, that's insane. It's got to be something serious. Serious enough to keep him out of that series. I also wonder, especially in this game that he came back in the game he was in for Colorado, if the chemistry he had at the start of the season kind of lost its spark. Matthew Phillips and Jacob Pelche had to play the rest of the season without Adam Ruzicka. He was pretty much up in Calgary since November. He'd been back and forth maybe a couple times, but he did not spend a whole lot of time with Stockton other than the beginning of the season. So yeah, they're your buddies and these guys mesh well together and everything, but they had to learn to play with other guys on the team. The Martin Pospicils, the Byron Phrases, those types of guys had to step in and help that line. So you kind of have to wonder if there was a little bit, if that would have worked out anyways if he was on there. I don't expect Adam Ruzicka to play 6 games and not be noticeable, but that's also something we just never would have got to see with the situation that was occurring that we're not really familiar with. As far as the team goes, I kind of wonder what type of scouting report they got. I know you can't do everything off the ice, but they've never played each other. And especially going through the regular season, playing tough teams, but playing them 10 times and knowing what to expect is a lot different than playing a team you haven't seen all year that you've been fighting for the top of the league for. So I don't think the Wolves stunned them. I think they knew they were going to play against a good team. I just don't think they knew how good of a team they were playing against. I think the one guy that got the best scouting report on that team was Dustin Wolf, because he stood on his head. And Dustin Wolf, I don't know if you guys watched the end of the game, and it just broke my heart just seeing him in tears. His face was all red. You can just see how much that series, he felt like that entire thing was his fault. It's I know he has some assists on the season, but he can't score goals for his guys. He did his job. I just wonder if there's some top guys that were fighting injuries, or kind of this was their first experience in a professional postseason, that some of the nerves got to them, because this team really didn't look like the team that I saw through the regular season and through the first 2 rounds they played in. They're a very dominating team. It's one of those teams, they're really fun to watch because you kind of don't ever expect them to lose, and seeing them lose not once, not twice, but 3 times in a row, and then to go on and lose the series, it's kind of you wonder where the spark was that they had the entire season. So, I mean, it was fun to watch still. They did what they could with it, but I would have liked to see better performances out of certain players that carried this team to that place in the postseason. That it wasn't enough, and I think defense was something that really the Wolves blew a hole open in for Stockton for sure.
I think so too. And it was, I agree with you that like this definitely did not look like the team that we saw in the regular season and in the previous 2 rounds. And I mean, a lot of credit to Chicago. They've been doing that for a lot of the season. I mean, I feel like, yeah, they won the regular season title. So that kind of gives them should give them the easiest path in the playoffs. And I feel like they had a pretty gentle one coming here. They got to duck Manitoba because Milwaukee somehow won that series. They beat up on a Milwaukee team that was just overpowered top to bottom. I mean, they blew out a Rockford team that looked like they were already on the golf course in their minds. So this was really Chicago's first real big test where you were like, they may not win this series. And they had all the answers. It looked like the entire series. Like, yes, it was back and forth. Yes, it was close. But at the same point, I think every game, it still looked like one where Chicago was getting the best of it. Like even the games that Stockton won, and they played well in those games. It still felt like they won because Dustin Wolf made more saves than Alex Lyon or Kochekov. It was not one where they were the better team for 60 minutes. It seemed like no matter what, Chicago was always giving them problems and giving them a fight no matter where it went, and that Chicago just had more answers than Stockton did from a strategy perspective, from an execution perspective. I mean, even on the first goal that Chicago scored in Game 6 last night, I mean, you see just uncharacteristic two Stockton wingers at the net front just completely never look over their shoulder, completely miss, Ivan Lodnia just standing right on the doorstep there. He bangs home one that, I mean, if Dustin Wolf makes that save, he may actually be, the next coming of Patrick Waugh or whatever, because that would have been insane. Because I don't even think Dustin Wolf saw him. It was straight just the puck is over there. Oh crap, I better dive. It was those are not mistakes you saw Stockton make the entire season. And the penalty kill alone, like that was, I mean, it looked like Bakersfield at least found some answers against them in a sense. I kind of, no offense, Cece, didn't expect Colorado's power play dominance to continue. Like it was one of those where, yeah, it was working for them, but I've seen too much of that to believe that was sustainable for them over the long period. But like Bakersfield found some success with them and not really reinventing the wheel either. Bakersfield found success generating chances by doing what you do when a team, traps down and takes away the high danger areas. They move the puck quickly outside, they collapse the formation, and they attack. And that's not exactly what Chicago did. I feel like Chicago got Stockton to make bad mistakes coming out of pressure and chasing the puck, and they had answers for that. They were pulling them out of lanes and getting Stockton to pressure them when they were spread too thin, and then just dicing them up from that. And it's surprising to see that, and it's hard to kind of correct from that from an on ice perspective, because it's one of those, you go to your players, like you show them the video, what were you supposed to do here? Yeah, I know that you know that. Next time do it. And it's, in that moment, I think you might be right that there might have been nerves or just seeing where they were, the team that they were playing against. And it's kind of tough in, those split second moments to be, making the right decision at every time. And I think that eventually sank Stockton. Anything else you want to say, Paige, in terms of what happened here and why we are saying goodbye to the Stockton for this series?
I think you pretty much well covered it. I would have liked to see someone like Connor Zary kind of fall into his own. He had high expectations going into the season, had that preseason injury, kept him out for a few months, and he had little spurts of kind of production that looked really well for him, but it's just, he wasn't the same guy you saw last season in the bubble and for his junior career and everything. So that's a player that I'm not giving up on yet, but if there was a time for him to emerge, what better time than the playoffs? So I was kind of hoping in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, come on, Connor Zary, let's go. And then another guy that did very well for Stockton last year, despite kind of their hot and cold season they had, was Luke Philp. And he was also out for quite a few games this series as well. I believe he did get into last night, but he was also missing. And he's one of those consistent players that you need a depth scorer. He might be the guy to help you out. So it's easy to look at kind of the best players on the team and say, hey, you didn't score 10 points this series. you made us lose or whatever it is. I also have to say Justin Kirkland, his name has to be thrown out there more because he is just not talked about enough. No matter how much I hear about him or interviews we've had with him, I think Justin Kirkland is kind of same level as Dustin Wolf as when you go to look back at the season, kind of the player that brought them to where they are. Obviously, there's the Jacob Pelche's Rookie of the Year, that sort of thing, the type of performance they have. But Justin Kirkland continued to be consistent through this series and was their top scorer through this series. So, I mean, I know Flames fans are excited that they're coming up to Calgary and they want to watch the Matthew Phillips and the Dustin Wolf and the Jacob Pelche, but I think they got to take a second look at Justin Kirkland as well. I remember going to a preseason Flames game and they had some of the regular guys in the lineup and they put Justin Kirkland out for the shootout. I'm like, what are they doing? I'm like, do they not know who's on the bench right now? But Justin Kirkland was almost perfect in shootouts this year. So I'm like, okay, now I understand. So I think Flames fans and fans of whatever the Heat's going to be called now need to keep their eye on him too, because he might not be the most flashy player, but he's got the stats to line it up, and he kind of is the backbone of the team in a scoring standpoint, whereas Dustin Wolf is the backbone of the team kind of in the net, obviously, and that holds you into games. But I just wanted to make sure that he was mentioned because I think he deserves the recognition.
Absolutely. I have it up here too. Justin Kirkland in the playoffs, 91st percentile according to the model, first line forward grade. He was the 82nd percentile in the regular season. So a nice bump up for him, and definitely someone who I feel like I agree with in the regular season, especially got overshadowed by the Peltiers and the Matthew Phillips of the team because, they were very much the star scorers where he was just merely very good. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the postseason, it seemed like he was everywhere all at once. One thing I do want to say that I made kind of the observation of watching last night, but I didn't post it on Twitter, is Matthew Phillips very much feels like his career is at this weird corner where he's either going to become the next TJ Tynan or the next Andrew Podorowski, where he's smaller and a bit undersized, but his game doesn't translate to the NHL, but he's an AHL legend. And he very much has some of the stuff that they do well in the AHL and scores off of it. Or he's going to transition and, find more of the ways in which his offense will transition to the next level. I don't think he's there yet, but I think his worst case scenario for his career is he becomes the next TJ Tynan, where he's, a career AHLer, but like a very, very good one. Whereas I think a lot of the stuff that he does at this level to score, like I see flashes of things that will translate, moments where he cuts to the middle or attacks the dot lane. But I also see a lot of things where he gets pushed to the outside and stays out there and makes plays from the perimeter. And that's, to me, what separates, your Tynans and Podorowskis from your guys who are a little bit more like Rocco Grimaldi, who had a good NHL, who's, a guy who scored double-digit goals in 4 seasons in the NHL. Or, Martin St. Louis is a very large overshot here in terms of what I think he could become at the NHL level. But like someone who's smaller but still manages to get the job done. You're like Jake Getzels or Cam Atkinson, like guys like that. I think if he's going to take a step forward to become more in that mold, he has the tools to get there, but it's a matter of whether he realizes them or not. Mm-hmm. Now, normally kind of at this point, though, we'd have a discussion here about whether this, in our postmortem, whether this season was a success or failure. We'd look ahead at the roster decisions for next season, who's under contract, who's a free agent. But that doesn't really apply here. The Stockton Heat have played their last game thanks largely to a variety of factors, from arena management, city council support, front office marketing inefficiency, and good old Calgary just eager to abandon its AHL market at the earliest possible date. So instead, I'm going to pivot here and ask, what sticks out in your memory about Stockton? I'll start with you, Paige. You've been covering this team for a while. What are some of the things that you are going to remember about the Stockton Heat?
I think, especially like in the near future, or kind of that's fresh in my memory, just seeing how they went from last year kind of turning into this team that was getting hard to watch towards the end of the season, where they only played 30 games and by the end of the season they're losing 10 in a row. And it's like, how many times can you ask a player, why are you losing? And then to come back and make it seem like you'll never lose a game and go be hot from the start and continue it throughout the whole season. Like there's flashes of that come up and are deeply memorable. Like all the awards that they got this year, the way Dustin Wolf shined through the season, some of their tight overtime wins, their shootout wins, even having someone like Adam Werner, who had his ups and downs, but also came and had some big wins for the team that some people forget about. Those are all things that will stick out, especially going through and seeing the way this team transitioned to a new coaching staff as well, or a new head coach, I should say. You don't know what to expect. This team, in kind of a preseason view, there weren't a whole lot of expectations. They knew they had some good prospects coming in, didn't know how good they would be, didn't know if their skills would translate. So I don't want to kind of put everything under the same umbrella, but I think a lot of this season is going to be super memorable for me. I also think kind of through the series and everything, being able to get one back on Bakersfield, because they give them a little bit of trouble towards the end of the season, being able to actually show that they could go the whole way to almost the Calder Cup Finals. Because it's one thing to be a good team, and then it's another one to actually work your way to getting that close to winning as well. So I have a lot of things I'm going to really look back at and be proud of this team for. And I'm going to really stumble over trying to remember that they won't be the Stockton Heat anymore. And that kind of hit me when I was hitting my post-game write-up. I was like, wow, I'm not going to be doing a post-game write-up calling them the Stockton Heat anymore. Like, that's done. So I don't know. I was never at a game in person, so I don't really have any in-game kind of memories that come up. But I think just the resiliency they had this year, I wouldn't call them underdogs because they weren't underdogs, but just chasing the next record, chasing the winning streaks, all of that kind of stuff. They really turned this franchise season into one to remember.
Cece, what about you?
Well, first and foremost, my first AHL game that I ever attended was at the Stockton Arena there in California. I was in the Bay Area for a Denver Broncos game, and December 8th, 2018, Stockton was hosting Manitoba. And Stockton in overtime getting the victory 3-2. Curtis Lazar with the game winner. And
I remember him.
Yeah, you remember him. Mikhail Burden in net for Manitoba, shelled 43 saves on 46 shots.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't 50, but still, that's quite a workload. So that was pretty fun. That was a good memory of Stockton. But the rivalry that they've had with the Colorado Eagles, and especially that last series that the Eagles played against them, and Stockton it was a battle of the top two of the top three goals for teams in the regular season. And, Chicago was right there on number 4, but it was Colorado, Stockton, and Chicago. And I'll try not to be long-winded because, it's my, that's my default MO. But yeah, I mean, living in Boise, Idaho for as long as I did, one of my first Steelheads games that I went to when I had graduated from high school and I was in college, November 10th, 2006, Stockton at Idaho. It's like the Thunder, and, just a long time of, 15 plus years of minor league hockey in the city of Stockton. And again, living in Idaho, now in Denver covering the Eagles, it's like to not have a team in Stockton just doesn't feel right. But I mean, the writing has been on the wall for a number of seasons now, and to Calgary they go. But it was fun while it lasted, and those are my good memories of the Stockton Thunder and the Stockton Heat, playing minor league hockey there.
For me, I always think of players, as I remember them from a certain team, and it doesn't matter where else they go in their career. Jaromir Jagr will always be a Penguin. It doesn't matter, where Dale Hunter went otherwise in his career. He will always be a Washington Capital. It doesn't matter where Daniel Alfredsson went in his career. Even if it was to the Red Wings, he will always be an Ottawa Senator. And there are a lot of guys who played for multiple teams, that also also played for the Stockton Heat. And for me, they will always be on the Stockton Heat. Like seeing Alan Quine in another jersey. No, that guy's on the Stockton Heat. Seeing John Gillies in other uniforms. Nope, that's the Heat's goaltender. And I mean, like, there are a lot of guys like that. Buddy Robinson doesn't play for him anymore. Still on the Stockton Heat in my mind. Mm-hmm. As well as a lot of guys who've just given me exciting moments, like Emilio Pettersson. Not the greatest or the flashiest player, but he's definitely had some absolutely just jaw-dropping, shorthanded goals, breakaway goals, where it was just like, and I'm like looking as they're skating back. I'm like, who? What? Emilio Pettersson. Okay, Emilio. There have just been a lot of those moments where, because I've I've never even been to the state of California. So I don't have, memories of Stockton Arena or anything like that. But I will say, I do feel bad for the Heat fans who stuck with them through this. And one thing that I've seen floating around a bunch here and there, and it comes up every time a team is relocated or something, that it was like, oh, it's not a hockey market. That is not a thing. Sports fandom is malleable, just like culture. It's why, some places take on to a sport versus others. Doesn't mean that that's because it's a racing market or a hockey market or a football market. That has nothing to do with it. Like, Stockton is still a hockey market. Whether or not, the Heat succeeded or failed, Stockton is still a hockey market. And it's sad to see that, the rest of the people involved, whether it was the city council, the people who were supposed to market the team, the arena management, the Calgary Flames, the fact that all of them put their thumb on the scale to make this team not successful has nothing to do with what Stockton was as a hockey market or who those people were as fans. And I hope that they take that with them, because I don't think, the market of Stockton is not going to be, I don't think they are without professional hockey for very long. The other thing too that's fun is in my local beer league game, in our league, our arch rival team uses the Adirondack Thunder jerseys and logo. So that always takes a little sore spot, because they are our arch rival team. They knocked us out of the playoffs this year, but in terms of the Heat, a lot of good memories. And this jersey will, stick around. I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm not going to sell it. I'll occasionally bring it on the podcast, and I will make sure that there is something Stockton Heat in our background in the seasons going forward until this show, bites the dust. So Stockton, you will be remembered with us. We hope you had fun. Paige,
we hope you had fun covering the Heat this season, because by God, I mean, coach of the year, goalie of the year, then Peltier won rookie of the year. Yeah. Or just on the team?
No, I think
he would have. He made the rookie all-star team, but I don't think he was actually named rookie of the year.
Sorry,
Jack Quinn won rookie of the year.
Yeah,
should have been Dustin Wolf.
Paige goes, but Stockton had a hell of a season. And Paige, like I told you, was it a year and a half ago that I think you'll be covering the Heat in person sooner than later? And I spoke it into existence. So it's going to be fun.
Your fault is what you're saying.
No comment.
So Stockton fans are going to be directing hate your way. Okay.
Where can they find you on Twitter?
No. Stop it. Both of you. Just stop it. Paige, with Sean's shenanigans set to the side, I do want to say it's going to be great for you to. I know we've been on this minor league hockey coverage journey together for a while now, and back in the ECHL with you covering the Kansas City Mavericks. Now you'll get the opportunity to cover minor league hockey again, and I think all is right in the world with you being able to go to games and to see it in person and to be a press correspondent in person once again. So I just wanted to say you've got that to look forward to, and here's to next season. And thanks for coming on and talking postmortem. Where can the people find your work and find you on social media if they don't know already?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Flames_update. I write for Full Press Hockey for the Stockton Heat, and I also write for Flames Nation. So you can find my work on either of those websites. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. They don't have a venue yet, but I'm pretty central, so I'm willing to drive. And I'm looking forward to actually seeing these guys play in person, because it's completely different seeing it on a TV screen versus seeing it in person. So I'm excited. I'm excited for more hockey content, and it's you still want to keep the season in the back of your mind, but I'm ready to look forward and see what Calgary holds for them. Awesome.
Well, thank you for coming on the program. It's finally, it's been a long time. I mean, you're such a busy lady, so it's good to finally have you on the show again.
Yeah, I wish I was on here talking about the Stockton Heat winning the Calder Cup, but I guess you can't have everything. So,
hey, there can only be one, and
that is true.
Anyway.
Thank you, Highlander.
At least I didn't do it in a Scottish accent. But anyway, thank you, Paige. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
I was going to say, please send Paige away before she has to listen to you be Scottish.
Oh, I'm not going to try. My Scottish accent is atrocious. I can do many accents, but anyway, we've got another segment to get to. So take it away.
Actually going to head to break here. After the break, we will get to the Calder Cup final preview. If you're just here for Stockton's postmortem, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. We have a lot of fun there. I do now some live tweeting, from my Twitter accounts, but you can find, me on the Twitters also. But, if you want to look for all of our links, you can find all of them and more at our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. That is the Calder Farmstead. Spell it on your own time. We're going to pay some bills, run some ads. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Now that we've mourned the exits of both Laval and Stockton, it's time for the main event, the Calder Cup Finals.
And just like the last Calder Cup Finals we had in 2019, this one features the Chicago Wolves and the Carolina Hurricanes AHL affiliates. The difference this time around is that the Wolves are the Canes AHL affiliates. And that's because the Wolves really saw their loss to the Checkers in 2019 and decided, if you can't beat them, become them.
Oh, what a philosophy. Yes, this time around, the Western Conference's Chicago Wolves will be facing off against the Eastern Conference's Springfield Thunderbirds. So, of course, we wanted to bring some friends on to talk about the first Calder Cup will be awarded since the summer of 2019, like Sean alluded to there. First up, covering the Wolves for Canes Country and also co-host and producer of the Locked On Kings podcast. Again, jumping on earlier in the program to talk about Ontario's new head coach, Marco Sturm, and back twice second time in just the same program and 3 times in the last 4 episodes or something like that. None other than Sarah Avampato once again joining the show. Sarah, thanks for jumping back on after that wonderful breakdown of Ontario's hire.
Thanks for having me. The snacks in the green room were fantastic. You really take care of your guests. You got us set up really great here.
Even with your request of taking all the brown M&Ms out of the bowl,
just testing you guys, and you passed.
Van Halen-esque, I gotta say. I mean, it just we aim to please. So thanks for coming back.
I've got my standards. They're
We do. And we're more than happy to accommodate. So don't worry about it. All right, well, let's go through the games. 6 games total for this series real quick.
7 games.
Oh, 7 games possibly. Yeah, I'm thinking of back to Chicago and Stockton. Don't mind me. We're looking forward. We're not looking behind us. So.
Don't worry. I know you were told there would be no math.
Correct. Yes, I'm in your shoes now. There would be no math. Yes, possibly 7 games. So let's go through the potential schedule here between Chicago and Springfield for the Calder Cup, for the AHL Championship, real quick. Game 1, Sunday, June 19th, 3 p.m. at Chicago. Game 2, Monday, June 20th. Okay, quick turnaround there. 7 p.m. also at Allstate Arena in Longmont, Illinois. Game 3, we jump over to Springfield, Wednesday, June 22nd at 7:05. Sean loves his extra 5 minutes in the game scheduling. Game 4, Friday, June 24th, 7:05 again, once again at the Thunderdome in Springfield. Did I jump ahead? Game 4, Friday, June 24th. Game 5, Saturday, June 25th. Another quick turnaround, 7:05 at Springfield. That's if necessary. Game 6, also if necessary, Tuesday, June 28th, 7 p.m. at Chicago. We go back to Longmont. And Game 7, if needed, Wednesday. Another quick turnaround. What is up with this? June 29th, 7 p.m. at Chicago.
Yeah, wow. A lot of back-to-backs there for a championship series schedule there. So, which, I mean, I don't think either team is going to be too bummed about, as both of them have quality goaltending tandems, but we'll get to that in a second here. Let's talk about Chicago and how they got here. First, Chicago beat Rockford in 3 games in the divisional semifinals. Then they beat Milwaukee in 4 games in the divisional finals. Then they beat Stockton in 6 games in the conference finals of the Western Conference. Their season record, 50-26, a .724 points percentage, first in the AHL. Their net power play and rank in the regular season, 17.1%. That was good enough for 11th. In the playoffs, though, that bumps up to 24.1%. That is 5th of the 23 playoff teams. Net penalty kill and rank in the regular season, 87.9%. That was third in the AHL. Bumped up a little bit in the playoffs to 88.1%. That is only 6th out of 23 because there's some weird 3-game, we killed all the penalties nonsense in there. Playoffs estimated PDO is 104, which normally would terrify me, but at the same point, you don't get to this point without having some good puck luck, period. So I'm less concerned about that in this kind of sprint to the finish here. Cece, though, we're going to do things a little bit differently for this preview. It's the Calder Cup, so walk me through it.
Correct. Yeah, we are going to be doing something a little bit different here, as I think it's fair to assume that Springfield Thunderbirds fans probably haven't caught too many Chicago Wolves games. So our preview is going to dive a bit deeper here into some individual players so Thunderbirds fans can better understand their opponent. # know thy enemy. There may be some familiarity with these guys like Andrew Podolowski and Alex Lyon, as they had played a fair amount in the AHL's Eastern Conference prior to coming to Chicago, but I think a healthy reminder is useful here. Speaking of Podolowski, we'll start with him. As we said, fans may be a bit familiar with him, and he plays a slightly similar game to the Thunderbirds Sam Anas. He's a playmaker first and foremost, but don't think that means he can't shoot. He scored 28 goals in the regular season. Podolowski is also a do-it-all kind of player. He's a smaller guy, but has some sandpaper to him, is responsible in his own end, is an effective penalty killer. Enough from me. Sarah, what are your thoughts on Andrew Podolowski?
Well, my first thought on Andrew Podolowski is if you're the Springfield Thunderbirds and you see him going behind your net, look out. Like that is like the Andrew Podolowski move. He goes behind the net. Stefan Nason or Josh Levo's at the front of the net, and one of them is going to score. He does it a million times every game. I watch him sometimes and I'm like, know what he's going to go do. He is definitely he is a guy who is one of those lead by example kind of players. Maybe doesn't have a whole lot of, isn't particularly vocal, but talking with him about leading this group of young players to a final somewhere he's been before on this literal same ice that he's been at now. He just talks a lot about playing the game the right way, and that is something that he lives by. It's a hockey cliche for a reason, but as you mentioned, responsible in his own end. He's a guy who can set up his teammates. He's a guy who can score on his own, and just is very much, he's like an emotional player. Patrick Williams actually pointed out on Twitter from conversations he had with Podolowski that he basically overhauled his training program over the summer to improve his skating. Looking at the goal he scored in the last game against Stockton, he scored it because he got a burst of speed that got him out ahead of most of Stockton. And Patrick Williams was saying, Andrew Podolowski from 2-3 years ago wouldn't have made that play because he didn't have the feet to get him to do that. So it's deceptive how much better his skating has gotten. But if you're watching him and you're Springfield, look out. Don't give him a chance to get going because he's going that way.
And I think that's one thing too, that like a lot of guys his size that don't make the NHL, that's the big reason that's pointed to, is you can't be 5'10" and 180 pounds, which is what I am, and not be able to move your feet well. Like that's what separates a lot of the guys that make it in the league from the guys that don't, is their ability to have those bursts. Because if, guys can muscle you off the puck if they can get their hands on you, but if they can't get their hands on you, advantage you. So I've definitely noticed that he's skated a little bit better this season. And I think that's why you've seen him not just dominate this season, is adding that gear to him, but also why he's going to get some NHL looks in the upcoming off seasons, I think.
Yeah, he's the guy that I think deserves that shot. Like every time he's gone up for a couple of games with Carolina, he's looked fine. Wolves fans would miss him, but he deserves a little chance up there.
And going from Podolowski, who signed from San Diego to Chicago in the offseason, we go from another Pacific Division guy coming over from San Jose in the offseason to Stefan Nason. And Nason also has a somewhat opposite number on the Thunderbirds in James Neal. It's like we've got doppelgangers on both sides almost for this matchup. But Nason is a big physical power forward, 6'1", 205 pounds, and somehow plays bigger than that, while also being able to play with pace. On the power play, you'll be able to find him quite easily, as he'll be the guy never more than 10 feet from the goal crease. Like you mentioned there with Podorowski setting up shop in his office behind the net, kicking it out front. He's an elite net front garbage man, but also has the hockey IQ and vision to find soft ice in the slot and move into passing lanes for backdoor plays. Nason, like Podorowski, is also a bit of a do-it-all player. He's good at his own end. He kills penalties. He's more than willing to throw his body around and be physical. He's even dropped the gloves a few times this season when necessary. Also, maybe once or twice that wasn't necessary per se. Sarah, of course, your thoughts on Stefan Nason?
Well, I think that kind of leads into my very first thought about him, which is, as much as Podorowski's the captain of the team, Stefan Nason's really the heartbeat of the team. He is the guy who gets them going. He is the guy who pumps them up. You see him get engaged and you want to go after someone too. He knows, Ryan Rosofsky knows, the team knows that sometimes he plays with a little too much of an edge. And he can be, Rosofsky has literally said that to us when asking him to talk about Stefan Nason. And I think he's gotten better as the season has gone on at not taking the bait that other teams set up for him, but it's pretty easy to get under his skin. And hopefully from a Wolves perspective, you're going to hope he has the maturity to not fall for it and not end up in the box, because he can't score goals if he's in there. Like you said, he is a player. He will score from anywhere. He will shoot from anywhere. He has a big, heavy shot, but does most of his business right out in front of the net. But I really think the key with him is for him to maintain kind of a level head, and hopefully it being the final, they all know what they're playing for. But where he has gotten into trouble is getting a little too physical. There was definitely a hit that in the last game that didn't get called against him, against Stockton, that he probably should have been in the box for maybe some head contact that didn't need to happen. So he can play with too much of an edge. And so he needs to be careful not to give Springfield that opportunity to rile him up. Springfield is going to want to try to rile him up, and his doppelganger on the other team, James Neal, might be responsible for some of that, I'm going to guess.
Quite possibly. But moving from the skaters, let's go in net, and we'll talk about the netminders here. Alex Lyon, and how do you say his first name?
Pyotr?
Mm-hmm.
Pyotr Kochekov. There we go. I just hadn't heard his first name. I always heard Kochekov. So, the two goalies, much like Springfield, the Wolves have a goaltending tandem with a veteran paired with a Ute. Both of them are very different goaltenders whose styles and strengths map on reasonably well to their Thunderbirds counterparts. Lyon, like Charlie Lindgren, is more of a technically sound goalie. He's around average size for a modern goalie, but doesn't have the higher end athleticism that you would see from other goalies. Lyon's game is based on puck tracking, strong anticipation, good movement, and a technically sound game. Kochekov is slightly bigger, but is much more athletic than Lyon. He has a lot of really good raw tools and has a lot more and is a lot more aggressive in the net. However, he still needs some polish and is occasionally erratic in the net. And he relies on his athleticism to allow him to recover when he makes those mistakes in tracking the play. In terms of playing the puck, Lyon has definitely had Wolves fans holding their breath seemingly every time he's in the crease recently, as while he's usually pretty quiet and unremarkable in that aspect of the game, he's been a bit shakier in that aspect recently. So, Sarah, once again, what do you say about this net mining tandem? Do you think Coach Warsofsky continues to go back and forth between the two here in the finals?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely going to continue to rotate them, especially with all the back-to-back games. And it's a little bit of an embarrassment of riches for the team, because you're in these back-to-back positions. You don't have to worry about overplaying Lyon. And, I think that, I know you guys already did your Stockton eulogy, but I think one of the things that didn't help them was Dustin Wolf just getting ground into dust essentially by the end of the playoffs. They didn't rely on their other netminder at all. And the Wolves were able to cycle through them, and the team has complete trust in both of those guys. Alex Lyon, I've never seen him play the puck as badly as he did in that one game. I've never seen that from him. And it just had to have been, it's just one of those games where everything went wrong from him. I don't think we see that again. He's very good at like not getting in his own head about games from what I've seen from him. So I think that, that game is a throw it in the trash. We're done with it. I don't anticipate seeing that from him, but every time he went out to play the puck, I was like, oh no, what are you doing? You should have learned from the first time. Don't do that. And it just kept coming back to bite him. Kochetkov, like you said, much more aggressive, both, trying to fight the other team and also just as a goaltender. I think that he has looked not as steady as he did during the regular season. I'm sure some of that is just rust from not having played a lot. And honestly, making the adjustment back from playing a couple of NHL playoff games, this is the game is different in the AHL. It's not quite as high quality shooters. It's a lot more physical. You're getting a lot more like garbage shots probably. So it didn't look quite as sharp in the games that he's played, but really settles in as time goes on. So it usually looks better at the end of the game than at the beginning, which is something that I think has kind of followed him all season long. I think that Lyon gets kind of the first start. They are going to keep going with that back and forth with them. But just total faith in both of those guys. And if either one of them falters, there's a strong goaltender behind him to put in in net. And I just keep hoping that Alex Lyon doesn't ever have to repeat his like AHL record 5 overtime, whatever game. I keep being terrified that it's going to happen, especially with all these games on weeknights. I don't need that in my life, but it feels like a thing that would happen to him. But no, I think they're very set in goal, and if one of them has problems, they're just going to go to the next guy and they'll be fine.
I mean, I think no matter what, we're going to see them both in the series. I expect whoever starts Sunday does not play the Monday game for game 2. I'm just going to safely assume we make to game 5 in this series. I think we make it all the way to at least 6. But that Friday, Saturday one, I'm assuming whoever starts Friday doesn't play game 5 Saturday. It is interesting to me, though, that like that very strange I'll be honest, in that game where Alex Lyon basically took the charge, I loved that play by him, but I think him getting angry about it was surprising. It's like when you stood there and were literally trying to take the charge, what did you think was going to happen?
Right. I was like, have you been talking to Kochetkov about like fighting the other team? Because like you don't usually see that level of, fire from Alex Lyon. He's usually very chill. What did you think was going to happen? A, B, have you been do you feel like you need to get on the train with your co-goalie and start fighting the other team? I mean, Wolves fans loved it. So,
I thought it was an incredibly savvy move. Like that was an opportunity basically to almost force a player who maybe wasn't paying the sharpest of attention into a penalty. Like that's exactly, as a veteran, the kind of, savvy you should have. But getting upset about it at the end, I was like, I mean.
Right. You kind of brought this on yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, flashes of 16, 17. Is that Jordan Binnington with the Wolves jersey on? I mean, sorry.
Let's not do that.
I couldn't help myself. Let's move on. Sarah, lastly, before we move on from individual players, has there been anyone else on the Wolves? And I know we kind of talked about this last episode when it was just me here flying solo, but any individuals that that the people should keep their eye on heading into the Calder Cup Finals here? 2 guys I'll give you. One is Jack Drury, who, I mean, if you're watching the AHL, this is probably the last time you're going to see him in the AHL. He deserves an NHL spot next year. He has gotten better and better every game. He has 16 points in 13 games, has just been a great contributor. Very responsible center. Also one of those guys who I think plays a lot bigger than he is. When I first met him, I was like, oh, thought you were, just watching him play. He seems like a much bigger guy, not afraid to mix it up, not afraid to get physical with people, but can absolutely burn you, shorthanded, power play, even strength, whatever it is. He is very fun to watch. He has risen to every challenge given to him. When you ask Ryan Warsofsky, what do you think this kid's ceiling is? He's like, I'm not going to give him one, because whatever I say, he's going to burst through it. So he's a guy with a lot of potential and has been really great for the Wolves in the regular season and now in the postseason. Other guy to keep an eye on,
has had a pretty quiet, like he's been very quietly good, and that's David Gust. He's got 10 points over 13 games, not a name that you would think of in terms of, necessarily top end NHL prospect kind of player, but he has been, on that line with Drury and Josh Levo usually really good at setting up plays for his teammates. He's definitely the guy who usually takes the hit to get the puck out to one of his teammates. Has just been really impressive, and I feel like a lot of people don't really take notice of him because he's setting up the guys for the goals, and he's not the one getting his name on the score sheet there. But he's been really crucial to the Wolves' success, I think, especially in the playoffs.
I think one guy for me that also kind of stands out too is Josh Levo. And Josh Levo is currently shooting 21.6% in the playoffs, which is almost double his regular season shooting percentage and career average shooting percentage. Basically, long-term, that's unsustainable for him, but this ain't the long-term. This is the best of 7. And right now, if I were a Springfield fan, I would be holding my breath every time Josh Levo goes to shoot because his stick is so hot right now, you need sunscreen just to stand near it. It's been a remarkable turn. Like, he's never been a bad player. Like, I'm not going to say, like, my God, who is Josh Levo? But even in the regular season, he was always a supplemental scorer. Like he was good enough to, carry a second line on his own. But given the lines the Wolves had, he kind of fell a little bit below the depth chart. But I mean, in the playoffs, he's just been white hot. It's been impressive. And again, there's no way going into next season he's going to sustain a 21.6% shooting percentage. But for 7 more games at maximum, yeah, he can absolutely still score, 4 or 5 goals in this series, and I wouldn't blink an eye at it. Like it's just sometimes, you fall into a good place and a good groove and a good routine, and it just sticks with you until you break it up. And unfortunately, summer is usually that breaking up point for everyone. But I think if we didn't talk about at least Josh Levo a little bit and his ability to find ways to get the puck in the net, we would be doing a disservice to Springfield fans, when he scores 4 goals on them in 3 games. And they're like, why didn't you tell me Josh Levo could do this? So
Surprise.
Yeah. Surprise. They call that the Levo surprise.
Don't give him ideas. He'll probably. I feel like if he hears that, he'll probably. The game that he scored the goal with like 17 seconds left to win it for the Wolves. At least 2 people on Twitter had predicted that, and I told him, and he was like losing his mind about it. So we don't need to give it the Levo surprise because then I'll tell him after the series is over.
Yes, please do, because Levo surprise.
All right, let's get into it here. The keys to the series for Chicago if they win. I have 3, and they're a little bit long-winded, but we'll get there. I mean, if you've heard me talk on this podcast, you understand that's the way it's going to be. So, number 1, if Chicago wins the series, it's because they sent the identity line into witness protection. The T-Birds have mixed up their lines a fair bit in the playoffs. Sam Annis has been the winger for Kostin and McGing, Kostin and Alexandrov, Neil and Pekka. Nathan Todd has been up and down the lineup, but the one line for Springfield that has stayed together the entire time is what the T-Birds call their identity line. That's Double Mac, Mackenzie McEachern, Dakota Joshua, and Will Bitton. Of Springfield's 52 goals scored in the playoffs, the identity line accounts for 20 of them. That's almost 40% of the team's goals coming from one line. We'll talk more about them with T-Birds broadcaster Ryan Smith, but in short, keeping that line under wraps is priority 1 for the Wolves if they are going to win this series. Second thing, if they win, Chicago is going to need to match the physicality of Springfield with an asterisk. Springfield has gotten to this point for a number of reasons, but one of them has been their ability to win battles at the net front, along the walls, and in general, be the more physical team. They breezed through the first 2 rounds just physically dominating Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and Charlotte. Laval pushed them with their team speed, but Springfield ground them down, and Laval just looked worn out by the time Game 7 was over. I don't think it's going to come as a shock that finishing checks, battling along the boards and in the net front is a big part of Springfield's game plan to grind the Wolves down. The Wolves have physicality baked into the roster with guys like Stefan Nason. And the Stockton series was physical and in your face, and the Wolves worked through that with flying colors. Springfield is going to be a step above that, though. I think the Jack Drurys and Jameson Reeses and Vasily Ponomarovs of the roster are going to need to step up their physicality as well. And I think the Wolves are best off matching the physicality of the T-Birds, and this is the asterisk part, without Kyle Marino in the lineup. Kyle Marino knows his role here. It's not a mystery to the coaches, to him, his teammates. He's there to throw his body around and drop the gloves when necessary and also not when necessary. He's not there to score goals or be a playmaker or block shots or, make controlled zone entries or any of that. He's there for one job, and that's fine. But putting him in the lineup means pulling someone who can score goals, make plays, block shots, create entries, has to come out of it. And Marino's role also comes with a fair share of minor penalties that kind of send the Wolves to the penalty kill. That's kind of the nature of what he does. But that's something the Wolves can't afford more of in taking penalties and bringing that talent out of the lineup. As good as the Wolves are, I don't think you can pull offense for physicality in Marino and be able to make this series work. It's worked to this, and the Wolves are going to have to that means the Wolves are going to have to match the physicality of Springfield, and they're going to have to do it with the lineup they've mostly been icing since the end of the divisional finals. And it's worked out fine to this point, but this is going to be a step up in battle level, and the Wolves need to meet that without their most physical player in the lineup, or they could suffer the same fate as Laval. Third and final point here, they need to continue to find success on the power play if they are going to win this series. What's been a big strength of the T-Birds this postseason is that they've managed to be incredibly physical without the parade to the penalty box. And you can point to the officiating as a reason for that, but that doesn't change the truth of the matter. Chicago had the best penalty differential in the regular season, averaging 4.2 power plays per game to 3.36 penalty kills per game. That's almost a full power play per game difference. Springfield is averaging 4.46 power plays per game to 3.23 penalty kills per game. That's averaging almost 1.5 power plays more per game difference. That's almost double Chicago's league-leading penalty differential from the regular season. What it boils down to is Springfield isn't giving teams many power play opportunities. Refs be damned. And Chicago is going to need to make those power play opportunities count. And while they just dusted Stockton, who had the best penalty kill in the regular season, Springfield's penalty kill has been lights out in the postseason. They're currently 90.5% net penalty kill. That would have been second in the AHL in the regular season. And like every pro team these days, Springfield plays the same PK structure that Stockton did, but they execute it differently. They put their own spin, their own flavor on it. In short, Chicago isn't likely to get many power play opportunities. Springfield's PK has been very good this postseason when it's been called on, and Chicago is going to need to overcome both of those to cash in on the man advantage if they want to win this series. Sarah, hearing all of that, my giant soapbox that I'm standing on here, what are your thoughts on what Chicago needs to do if they want to win this series?
Yeah, the series, from the way that you're describing it, feels like they need to kind of merge their philosophy against Milwaukee, which, the Admirals are a very physical team. They're used to that level of physicality. They, put Cal Marino in for a couple of games. But they need to kind of merge that style of play with how they were successful against Stockton. It's like they need to become a whole new team in some ways. And I'm expecting that first game to be very tentative, just like the first game against Stockton was, because neither of these teams know each other at all. The penalty thing is huge. That 90 plus PK rate for Springfield is a little terrifying, especially given, the Wolves have, and like you said, officiating, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, doesn't matter. It is what it is. They're calling things the way they're calling it. Even if your coach happens to get real mad and say some words that you can absolutely guess what he's saying based off the video, it is what it is. And the Wolves have had way more penalties against, especially in this series against Stockton, than I think they're comfortable with. It's been a parade to the box. Some of that I think was Stockton's speed giving them a little bit of trouble. But some of it was just unnecessary. Some of them weren't really penalties, but can't do anything about that. I think that is going to be, special teams is going to be huge on this, of both Wolves staying out of the box and doing their best to take whatever penalty or power play opportunities they have and be successful on them. It's a tall order, but I think that it's going to be fun and scary and fun.
It's a fun sandwich with a little scary in the middle. Gosh.
For me, I think this series is very much going to be a knockdown, drag-out battle with spurts of like, let's see who can sprint through the neutral zone the fastest. And like, I think, once a game, you're going to get like 2 minutes of just trading chances back and forth before both teams settle down and realize they shouldn't actually do that. But I think for the most part, you're going to see it's going to look a little bit like the Stockton series in terms of the physicality and the pace of it, with occasionally some sprinklings in of like, what if we just lost our minds and got into a track meet for like 120 seconds?
That sounds very stressful.
I think it's going to be fun. I mean, it may be stressful for the fans of the series and for people, doing daily reporting. But for me, the guy who can hit pause and stuff, I think it sounds fantastic.
And with that said, Sarah covering the Wolves for a number of years, even back to that 2019, Calder Cup Finals appearance against Charlotte, we have to ask, do the Wolves come out on top in this one?
So I will put the caveat on this with my coverage of the Kings, I found that whenever I said the Kings were going to do a good thing, they did a bad thing just to spite me. And so I started predicting that they were going to lose all the time, just because usually then they would win. I'd be like, oh, you're clearly going to lose this game against Montreal, the literal worst team in the league at this point. And then they'd win it. So I will apologize in advance if my Kings curse/jinx carries over to this, but I have to go Wolves in 6. I partially because when they did it in 2019, also first off, I did not ever think I'd be covering 2 Calder Cup Finals, let alone 2 technically consecutive Calder Cup Finals. For the final, I went to Charlotte for the away games. I was like, this is a great opportunity. Never going to have it again. I'm not going to be able to make it to Springfield this year. So if the Wolves win it, I'd love to see them do it on home ice. Also for the weird kind of bookend symmetry of Podorowski lifting the cup with Charlotte and then with the Wolves on the same ice. But no, I'm going to go Wolves in 6 because it sounds fun and makes me happy. And I hope I didn't just curse the team.
It's like what we covered earlier in the show. Sean picked Laval to come out of the East. I picked Laval to come out of the East. And the model picked Laval. So when we usually have the trifecta here on the Calder Farmstead, that is the kiss of death for that team.
I do not agree with that. I want to see more evidence. I do not accept those results at this time.
I hope you're not expecting me to go back to the video, because that's not going to happen. Back to all the instances that we've predicted these series.
When we look I will go over this in the off season. Put a reminder on Google. I will on the Google calendar, whatever it is. Yeah. I do not believe that is accurate.
Okay. Well, we'll have to vet that a little bit, but I think, if we go trifecta, but we'll have our picks after we talk to Ryan Smith. So we're not gonna show our hand quite yet. I put that GIF out there on Twitter of Snoopy holding his hand and laying it down, and there's 5 aces. So
you gotta wait. That's part of the Calder Cup preview. You got to see the whole thing. So
exactly.
Anyways, Sarah, before we let you get out of here, where can people find your work on the interwebs?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Write Said Sarah. It's WRITE said Sarah with an H, the only proper way to spell the name. You can find Canes Country at canescountry.com. They're also on Twitter. I'll be having game preview is not the right word. I'll be having game recaps after each game. I usually kind of stick around to answer things in the comments. So always glad to hear from people watching the Wolves, whether it's the first time or you're a longtime fan. If you feel like hearing more about Marco Sturm, you can also find Locked On Kings on Twitter at Locked On LA Kings, and also wherever you get your podcasts.
Perfect. Sarah, I have the feeling now that you're basically becoming a regular on the show that this will not be the last time we talk to you. So I won't say goodbye. I'll just say see you later. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Until next time. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks to Sarah Avampato for coming on and talking about the Chicago Wolves. Now we jump over to the Eastern Conference team of the Calder Cup Final, and that is the Springfield Thunderbirds. And we decided to go right to the source, right to the team itself, and talk to the manager of media and community relations and broadcaster for the T-Birds. His prior stats, or I guess his prior creds, include the director of broadcasting for the USHL's Madison Capitals and the main play-by-play broadcaster for Penn State hockey. Again, contractually obligated to mention that here on the Calder Farmstead, with Sean being an alum. But without further ado, bring it on from Springfield, play-by-play man himself, Ryan Smith. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show, bud.
CC, Sean, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I know you have a flight to catch, so we will do our best to keep this as brief as possible. O'Hare waits for absolutely no man.
No, it does not.
No, it does not. All right. Well, yeah, with that said, let's get started. We're going to channel our inner David Byrne and ask, how did they get here? So, Springfield Thunderbirds, previous playoff rounds, they beat Wilkes-Barre Scranton in the divisional semifinals in 3 games. They beat Charlotte in the divisional finals in 3 games. Did not lose in either one of those series. You jump over to the Eastern Conference final, Laval and Springfield going the distance. But Springfield emerges victorious. They beat Laval in the conference finals in 7 games. Regular season record for Springfield was 43-33, 0.625 points percentage. The net power play and rank 16.6%, good for 13th in the AHL during the regular season. During the playoffs, that bumped up to 21.3%, good for 7th out of the 23 teams that made the Calder Cup playoffs. Net penalty kill and rank 81.2%, 26th out of the 31 teams. But in the playoffs, 90.5%, 4th out of the 23 postseason teams. And the playoffs estimated PDO, a bit of a bender here, 103.7. Not too shabby at all.
On its way down, at least. They were at like 107 or almost going into the previous round. So a little bit cooled off, but still, you don't get this far playing with ordinary luck and ordinary shooting talent. So I don't think that's too terribly bad. As we talked about with Chicago, they're up there as well. So
true. Yep. Both riding big PDO benders. So leveling out probably going to occur a little bit here in the Calder Cup Finals. So now we're going to do something a little bit different here, as I think it's fair to assume that Chicago Wolves fans probably haven't caught too many Springfield Thunderbirds games, and probably vice versa. So our preview is going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the individual players, so Chicago Wolves fans can better know their opponent. Let's first talk about Sam Anis. He's a dynamic playmaker first and foremost, and is similar in style to Andrew Poturalski in that sense. He also played for the Iowa Wild a couple seasons ago, so if Wolves fans hadn't, been watching for the past couple years, we're going to catch you up a little bit. Him and Poturalski both see the ice very well, and it can find passing lanes to the slot from the perimeter. I think Anis is a bit better of a shooter and has better hands than Poturalski, but I also think Andrew Poturalski is a better 200-foot player. I don't see Sam Anis killing a lot of penalties as a little example of that. Ryan, enough of me talking. What can you tell us about Mr. Sam Anis and what he means to the Springfield Thunderbirds?
Well, I think Matthew Pekka, who's played with him multiple times from their days at Quinnipiac together, said it best that Sam is the engine of the Thunderbirds power play when it is clicking at its best. And in the first 2 rounds of these playoffs, you saw in droves what made that the case. Sammy, as you mentioned, CC, not only an extremely gifted vision at such an elite level. I think it's NHL level vision that he has in his playmaking ability. But you couple that with the fact that he is willing to take shots. And because he is willing to shoot the puck, and he's been in the top 5 in the AHL in shots on goal pretty much all season, and he's been right up there with Springfield's leaders in the postseason, even in the Laval series where it wasn't going quite as well for him. I think what that does for him as much as anything is because he is so willing to sometimes have that shoot first mentality that he opens up his own passing lanes for himself by doing that. And this year he hit 20 goals again, which certainly for someone who's classified as a playmaker more than a goal scorer, that's a good, it's not a total balance, obviously, but it's good to have enough of a goal scoring threat to you to open up those other opportunities. And when you have the shooters and the playmaking ability that the T-Birds have throughout their top 2 power play units. Now, do I think they're potentially as high level as Chicago in their top 6 forward group? Not necessarily, but I think what Sam Anis provides is a real intangible leadership to this team. He, to your point, CC, he does not kill penalties, and he's the first to admit he does not kill penalties. But I have seen from Sam in these playoffs especially a commitment in the defensive third of the ice that I don't think Sam's a player that takes any shift lightly in the regular season. I don't think he's someone that you classify as someone who takes shifts, games off. I don't think that's him. But what I'm getting at is in the playoffs, we've seen him go that extra step, willing to lay his very small frame out to block shots, make key reads deep in the defensive zone, coming all the way back to the goal line if need be in certain situations. And the T-Birds goaltending, as great as it's been in this postseason, it's because of efforts from the skill guys like Anis that has allowed them to really take off like this. And I think the conference finals, excuse me, I think the conference finals against Laval are a perfect example of, Sam might not have had his offensive game going, but he did a lot of other little things really, really well, which if he didn't do that in a 7-game series, it was a razor's edge of a difference when it all came down to the end.
Pivoting over from Sammy the Greek to another playmaker, the real deal James Neal. And Neal, he also has a similar counterpart on the Chicago Wolves in Stefan Nason. You know, they both play a power forward, gritty style of game. They love to be net front. He's more physical, better 200-foot player, I would say. But Neal is the better shooter and has been maybe the less easily instigated of the two. Neal, like Nason, seems to have taken on a veteran leadership role, despite the fact that he isn't a captain or an assistant captain. Ryan, once again, lobbing it over to you. What do you got to say about the real deal, James Neal?
Well, I think, first of all, if you told us back in the month of October that James Neal would be with us for 25, 26 regular season games, and let alone end up on the playoff roster after that, I think we all would have looked at you and laughed. And that was probably a fair assessment at the time. But James Neal, from the moment he arrived with the T-Birds, and people could have the indication of, oh, he must really hate being down in the American League after almost 900 games in the NHL, 110 playoff games in the NHL. What's the motivation to keep going? Why don't you walk away? And Nealer caught up, I believe, with Elliot Friedman a couple weeks back, and I thought it was really telling what he said to Elliot. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, you can't walk away angry at the game. And that was kind of the discussion he had with people in his inner circle, guys in St. Louis, veteran players, and his teammates, leaders like Ryan O'Reilly, Braden Shen, Colton Parayko. All of those guys told James at that time, go down, get your reps down there. We could need you back up here at some point. And Nealer said, even though that return to St. Louis never did happen for him, he's really getting his enjoyment out of the game again, because I think in St. Louis, he kind of was just stuck in that no man's land, third, fourth line role. And you don't have a player like James Neal playing third or fourth line minutes. That's just not going to be an effective way to play. And to his credit, he's come into this dressing room down here, and among a boatload of different types of leaders in this room, he has been the consummate pro. The teammates and the guys in that room absolutely love him. And what he did for Matthew Pekka and Sam Anis's game down the stretch when they were united on a line together for the better part of 2 months, it took Pekka and Anis's already high skill level games and took them to a whole new stratosphere in the back half of the season. And I think that's the most telling thing with Neal for me. It's not the fact that he's a 40-goal man in the NHL in his past. It's not the real deal aura that comes with his name and comes with everything that James Neal is to the normal hockey viewer who obviously has seen him play and seen him be a key element in multiple teams' runs to the Stanley Cup Finals. I see it as James Neal being just the quintessential teammate who, like 34-year-old James Neal versus a 21-year-old teammate of his, they're both selling out and they're both doing everything in their power to chase down a championship, because people forget James Neal is still looking for his first championship at any level. So anyone who wants to buy into the does he really care being in the AHL, I can assure you right now that very few guys in that dressing room want this thing more than James Neal right now.
It reminds me a lot of another veteran NHL player, and we actually have him memorialized. Well, maybe not memorialized, but at least honored.
I think I already know who you're going to say.
Mike Keane?
No, I was going to say Matt Molson, but
that's another great example. But no, Mike Keane, after 15, 16 years in the NHL, goes and plays 5 seasons for the Manitoba Moose. And in so much that he was such a great, inspiration and just overall, selfless teammate that he had his number retired. And that's the little, normally the
it's
number
normally right here, but you can't see it because my box is in the way. But during other times, so we had to transition so that when we had the 3 people box open, that different things showed up and we didn't cover everything. So unfortunately, he's like right here is Mike Keane's retired banner.
Right.
But lastly, let's talk about goaltenders here. I think it would be remiss if we didn't cover the 2 very different netminders that you have. Joel Hofer and Charlie Lindgren, aka Chucky Sideburns, have been the tandem in net for Springfield in the postseason. And while they're both very different goaltenders, they both had success. Hofer is the younger and bigger goalie of the 2, definitely likes to come out of his crease more and challenge shooters despite being the larger goalie. He also has a lot of high-quality raw tools and uses them very aggressively. He's also probably one of the best puck-handling goaltenders I've ever seen, not just in the AHL, but period. Chucky Sideburns takes on more of a blocking style, though, uses more sound technique to make saves look less dangerous than they actually are. Although the one he made last night looked very dangerous and genuinely had me, jaw dropped. But he's less likely to be at the top of his crease, despite being around average size in terms of goaltenders these days. He relies more on reading the play with solid but simple movements and quick reflexes. And while he's still likely to go play the puck behind the net, he's not looking to launch passes through the neutral zone like Hofer is. Ryan, it's not really common for teams to be willing to kind of go back and forth with goalies in the playoffs. It's usually kind of one guy you ride until he falls. But that's not been the case here. What's the relationship like between the 2 goaltenders, especially when both of them clearly want to play, but there's only one net?
It's something I've asked both of them enough times this year that they probably want to slap me if I ask them one more time. But the relationship that Charlie and Joel have is one of just the utmost respect and appreciation for one another. And it's such a cool dynamic to see. You mentioned how they're different goaltenders in different ways. Hofer being the puck handler, the bigger guy, the guy who has more economy in his motions because he's so big and takes up so much space. Charlie Lindgren's more of the battler, more of the guy who kind of has that heart on his sleeve mentality when he's in the net. And then off the ice, Joel Hofer is 21 years old. You might think he must be some wild strung 21-year-old immature, but he's one of the most composed, poised. Doesn't really look like anything changes his demeanor in anything that goes on. And Charlie Lindgren off the ice is just one of the guys that you're drawn to in a locker room just because of his personality. Very positive guy in so much of how he approaches the game and how he approaches being a teammate. There is a desire from both guys to want the other to succeed. And I know every goaltender in the world in a public media setting will say, yeah, I want the other guy to succeed. I want to have that competition to really push each other and push our team to be great. And I think sometimes that's said just out of saving face to say, yeah, I obviously can't say I want him to stink so that I get the net. But in this situation, they've both understood all year that Drew Bannister has the utmost trust in both of them. And I think they've taken that trust that they both have. Drew Bannister has not played favorites with either one of them all season, but it has allowed both of them to, A, get meaningful repetitions in games, B, have predictability in when their next outing would be, because up until the Laval series, anytime that Charlie and Joel were both on the roster from, I believe it was the second week of March until the middle of the Laval series, as long as they both were on the Springfield roster, Drew Bannister did not play any one of them in back-to-back games for the span of about 2.5 months. And so they knew that when it was one guy's turn, the next guy knew he was going to get the net next. And that takes a lot of pressure off of you. Instead of having a mindset of, oh God, I got to play well to earn the right to have the net again. It really, for a young goalie like Hofer especially, I think that had to work wonders for him to know that regardless of what happens, I know it'll be my net again every other game, and we'll get our reps. And now come playoff time, when you're in the dog-eat-dog world of the Calder Cup playoffs, where you have God knows what kind of scheduling hiccups, and 3 and 4 to start the Calder Cup Finals will be the perfect example of that. It's great to have 2 goalies, because you're gonna have guys who are fresh, and it's nice to not have to sacrifice one guy's energy and sap him of that energy, put him at risk for injury. And instead, you have 2 guys you can rely upon. And if this is a 6-7 game series, that could end up becoming a factor. Of course, on the Chicago side of things, they could be saying the same thing right now with Kochetkov and Lyons. So I think that's a big reason why these 2 teams are where they are, because they have nearly identical situations with a young upstart goalie who is seen very highly in the Carolina system in Kochetkov, just the way that Hofer is seen very highly in the St. Louis organization. And then you got the savvy veteran on both sides. Alex Lyon's been to the conference finals in the American Hockey League playoffs before with Lehigh Valley. And Charlie Lindgren, of course, has had the year of his life this year. When you only lose 8 or 9 times all year, and I think now 10, including the playoffs, in 40-plus outings, something's going right for you at that point.
Absolutely. All right.
Ryan, you've got to get out of my brain, because I was going to bring up the Chicago and Springfield dual goalies, and Laval, of course, or Laval. I've been pronouncing it wrong this whole time. Laval riding Caden Primeau, riding him and riding him and riding him some more. And then on the other side of the coin, you had Stockton with Dustin Wolf. And of course, when you have Dustin Wolf, it's like you don't need to go to a second goaltender. But again, when you have 2 quality caliber goaltenders with both Springfield and Chicago, why not play them both? But
yeah, and I can't help but think in both of those situations, Wolf with Stockton and Primeau with Laval, as great as they both were in the series deciding games, you could just tell that at some point, eventually, that energy had to hit a wall. And I think you finally saw it happen to Wolf late in the 3rd period of Game 6. You saw it finally happen to Primeau midway through regulation in Game 7. He had done a whale of a job. I think he kept 29 of 30 out through 30 minutes of play, and then the T-Birds eventually broke the levee, and that ended up being the end of it. And I think that just kind of speaks to the risk reward of riding a goaltender who's playing really well. And don't let it be mistaken. Without Caden Primeau, that is not a 7-game series. The way that series was going, there's no way Laval makes it to 7 games without Caden Primeau, the way he played in that series. He nearly stole the Eastern Conference Finals. He was that good.
All right. Lastly, Ryan, before we move on, recognizing that we can't talk about everyone on the T-Birds here, is there anyone else you'd like to give a little shout out to that is an important part of the roster, but maybe gets overlooked a little bit at times? With guys like Annis and Neal, taking up a lot of the breathing room.
Yeah, gentlemen, I actually think it is a trio, and I think they are the 3 most important players in this series. Period. And I think CC's looking at me, and I think he knows where I'm going with this. The T-Birds, Drew Bannister calls it the identity line. And I know he's not the first head coach to use the term identity line for a line that is a catalyst, a fire starter. I compare this unit to what the Tampa Bay Lightning had when they had Barclay Goodrow, Yanni Gourde, and Blake Coleman. Guys who you rely upon at the start of games, guys you rely upon after a goal is scored for or against, guys you rely upon to drive possession and drive energy. And I'm talking about Mackenzie McEachern, Dakota Joshua, and Will Bitton. You look at the Laval series, and The T-Bird power play until Game 7 was abysmal. And in fact, it was nothing. It was literal nothing for 6 games of that series, 0 for 29. They came through in Game 7, but they don't win that series without great 5-on-5 play. And Dakota Joshua, Mackenzie McEachern, and Will Bitton absolutely drove the bus offensively for the T-Birds that entire series. All 3 of them bring a ruggedness to their game. McEachern and Joshua are obviously the bigger guys on that unit. Will Bitton is like I don't even know the right word to describe Will Bitton. It's like a jackrabbit. You just cannot get him to stop moving his feet. He'll run through you. He'll bug the living you-know-what out of goalies. He'll end up in the crease accidentally on purpose, as Eddie Olczyk would like to say. And those 3 will just cycle you until you're blue in the face. Your legs are turned into jello, turn into spaghetti, whatever you want to call it. And it might not have had payoff throughout the entire series. But when games mattered the most, and we're talking about Game 3 in Laval, we're talking about Game 5 in Laval, and we're talking about Game 7 back in Springfield, when the T-Birds needed that next win to maintain a lead in a series, all 3 times that line delivered. And they don't have to score goals to be the most important trio on the ice. If they are the group that's matched up against Podorowski and Nason, and I imagine they will be, that will be the key to this entire series for me.
All right. Well, very good transition there, because we're going to talk about what the Springfield Thunderbirds need to do if they're going to win this series. So some keys of our own here. I have 3. Number 1, if the Thunderbirds win, it's because they were able to keep Chicago contained in the neutral zone. We've seen time and time again in the playoffs, the Wolves just dominate in transition. Teams think that they've managed to contain them, and then suddenly, boom, they sneak a stretch pass through to a breakaway. It's 1-0. Chicago does such a good job of getting around the first forechecker and just flying through the neutral zone, gaining the offensive blue line with speed on the regular. We thought that Stockton would be the team to slow them down after the heat cooled off Colorado, but that was firmly not the case. Chicago's transition game, too, hits a little bit different than what we saw from Laval. Laval looked to have its forwards push the pace out of the zone and then would have defensemen do a lot of glassing out into the neutral zone, hoping that their forwards could then pick up the puck with speed and win those races. Chicago is looking to make more controlled exits, and the Wolves' defense have shown tremendous poise under forechecking pressure in finding ways to still get defensive zone clears with possession, as well as connect on big stretch passes tape to tape. The T-Birds are going to need to make sure they balance getting pressure on defensemen and dump-ins without getting trapped behind the play, because they were too deep forechecking, and now there's a Wolves rush behind them. And that's going to be a hard balancing act for them, but if they win, it's going to be one they need to pull off. Second thing that the T-Birds need to do if they win is they need to take advantage of the power play opportunities that they're given. The craziest storyline for me this postseason with the Wolves has been penalties. They had the best penalty differential in the AHL in the regular season, and it wasn't even close. The Wolves went to the penalty kill 3.4 times per game on average in the regular season. That alone was 5th best in the AHL. In the playoffs, it's ballooned to 4.5 per game. That's over a full extra penalty kill more per game in the playoffs. That ranks 21st of the 23 teams in the AHL. And you can cry about officiating until Kleenex offers you a sponsorship, but the Wolves' parade to the penalty box has put them in danger like they're a Ralph Wiggum meme. And that has really only been the only real chink in the armor of the Wolves this postseason. And like any chink in the armor, you need to make sure you go after it. The T-Birds' power play has looked dominant at times this postseason, and then Laval shut it down for the better part of 7 games. They had Springfield all twisted in knots, as you said, Ryan, trying to fix it as well. They used different personnel groups, shift tactics, shift assignments. They moved James Neal from the bumper to the left half wall to the right half wall. They put Sam Annis all over the formation. Laval also ended their postseason with a net penalty kill just 2.1% higher than where Chicago is right now. And Chicago's PK structure is the same because basically every hockey team in the professional sense uses the same PK structure, the check press, the wedge +1, but they executed a lot differently than Laval did. And Springfield is going to have to figure that out, how they're different and how they're going to attack it if they want to win. Third point for me here is this needs to be all hands on deck. Chicago is a top-heavy scoring team, but don't let that fool you into thinking that they don't have depth, because that just isn't true. Richard Panik, Jamison Reese Lightning, David Gust. These guys aren't stars, but they can score. For Springfield to win, they're going to need production from the bottom of the lineup. Guys like Tanner Kaspick. Admittedly, Hugh McGing, but he played a good series last year, but was scoreless in the last 4 against Laval. And also that Kostin Alexandrov-Annis line needs to put points on the board for sure. Again, they played very well in that series, but this is going to be an all-hands-on-deck situation. Springfield is in the Calder Cup Finals here against the regular season champion that beat the second-best team in the league in convincing fashion to get here. Chicago has worn the crown most of the season and all of the playoffs. They are prepared for every team's best shot. So all hands on deck here. Springfield is going to need to have all its players shooting their best shots, because in the words of the immortal philosopher Little, you come at the king, you best not miss. Ryan, what do you see out of this Thunderbirds team that they need to do in order to hoist a Calder Cup in Springfield once again?
Oh, that's if I knew. If I knew. I think when I've looked at this series, admittedly, I haven't done my full-on viewing of Chicago. That'll be what most of my travel day tomorrow looks like. It's hard not to be blown away by the talent that Chicago has in that top six. And you look at the fact that CJ Smith was on the line during the regular season for so much of it with Podorowski and Nason, and they were, for the longest time, 3 of the top 5 scorers in the entire league for the whole year. Nason led the league in goals. Podorowski was leading the league in points. Pretty sure I had both of them on my AHL first team ballot when all was said and done. I think on the T-Bird side of things, you need to try to turn this into a rugged possession, wear them down, wear them out in the offensive zone. You need more than McEachran, Joshua, and Bitten to be possessing the puck in the offensive zone for 30, 45 seconds at a time. You got to limit, as you said, Sean, you got to limit that transition that Chicago has. And you mentioned T-Birds just faced a Laval team that thrived on speed and transition in the neutral zone. But you're right. It's kind of different. You're comparing apples and oranges in terms of the skill available at Chicago's disposal versus what Laval had at their disposal. And Laval's injury situation certainly didn't help them when that series came to an end. Chicago's a much, much healthier team than Laval was. And so for the T-Birds, I'll say this. I'm completely on board with your thoughts on the power play there, Sean. If the T-Birds think that 2 for 32 is going to get it done in a Calder Cup Finals, they are grossly mistaken. And that they need that figure. If I was prognosticating, I would say they probably need to go about 1 for 4 or better if they want to come away with a Calder Cup championship. Now, are they capable of it? Absolutely. Look what the Charlotte Checkers penalty kill did all season long. They were top 2 or 3 in the league, pretty much start to finish. And once they saw the T-Birds in the playoffs, it was as if the T-Birds took everything Charlotte did in the regular season, threw it in the garbage disposal, flipped the switch, and it was garbage from that point forward. And Springfield's got to try to find a way to do that again against Chicago. They need to try to, if Kochekov's going to get the net more than Lyon, if it's going to be the younger guy in net, you need to try to get under his skin and ruffle his feathers. Caden Primo was a tough nut to crack. T-Birds found a way to crack him in 4 games. Wasn't always easy in how they arrived to it, but they have to maintain that persistence and that shooting first mentality that for the longest time this year, Drew Manister's team has had that success. T-Birds averaged, I believe, around 33 shots a game during the regular season, which put them top 10 in the league. You're going to need something similar to that. This is going to be, if the T-Birds are going to win this series, they're going to have to drag it out, grind it out, and try to make this uncomfortable for Chicago and make the neutral zone as clouded as humanly possible for the Wolves. And I think if you get a combination of a couple of those things, I have no doubt in my mind the Thunderbirds are capable of winning this series. But I'm also not blind to the fact that their level of play against Laval over 7 games in total was good enough to beat the Rocket. It will not be good enough to beat the Wolves.
All right. Well, with all that said, we've got one last thing What is going to be the X factor in this series? What is going to be the X factor? Sean, we'll have you go first, and then Ryan, we'll have your closing thoughts before we let you go.
All right, our X factor for the series is goaltending. And surprisingly, we haven't used goaltending as the X factor for, these playoff series previews too often, but it's hard to overstate the importance here. Both sides have used tandems in net with a veteran paired with a Ute, Springfield with Chucky Sideburns and Joel Hofer, Chicago with Alex Lyon and Peter Kochekov. Both have seen their netminder make saves that should be on SportsCenter. Both teams have seen their netminders make blunders and give up soft goals in key moments. Both sides are going to juggle which goalie to start and win. At the end of the day, I think this is a fantastic and entertaining series featuring teams that can play effectively in a lot of styles and game states. But these are two teams with top AHL talent on offense that are going to create dangerous scoring chances despite the best work of the defenses on the other side. In those moments, does your goalie make more saves than the other guy? More than forechecking, pace, special teams, depth, etc.? That's the question that determines the series in my mind. It's as simple as that. Does your guy stop those pucks when he needs to? That's our X factor. Ryan, what are your thoughts here in terms of goaltending as an X factor, or do you think something else will be the big thing that puts its thumb on the scale?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail pretty good with goaltending, and it's been what has gotten the T-Birds to this point all year. When they were going through their troublesome time during the season, it was when Joel Hofer was forced to carry the load in net. But as soon as Charlie Lindgren was back from St. Louis and they got to go back to that tandem system, their goaltending just took off from that point forward. Down the stretch, T-Birds had a historic end of their regular season. I think it was about 250 minutes combined between Hofer and Lindgren without allowing a goal. T-Birds finished the year with 3 consecutive shutouts, and the fourth to last game, the only goal they gave up was in the first period. So it absolutely, and this was against no slouches for teams down the stretch either. And the T-Birds have gotten a shutout from a goaltender, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, they didn't get one against Wilkes-Barre Scranton, but they got 50 saves from Charlie Lindgren, and he gave up only 1 in that game. They got a shutout from Joel Hofer in game 1 of round 2 against Charlotte. They got a shutout in game 7 of the conference finals from Charlie Lindgren. Both goalies are capable of stealing a game. And I think for the Thunderbirds to win this Calder Cup Finals, there will need to be at least one game that is stolen, and it will more than likely have to be in Chicago. And I think you couple goaltending with what I said before about McEachern, Bitton, and Joshua just trying to wear down the skilled defensemen of the Wolves. I think that's going to be a huge factor in all of this as well. Joey Keane and Jalen Chatfield are 2 guys I've seen in the Atlantic Division before in the past, or in the Atlantic and North Divisions before in the past. They're 2 guys that can really set the pace of play offensively from their own zone. Very talented guys, but not being the overly biggest guys in the world, I think you have the ability potentially over a long series, and especially now in these teams' 4th round of the Calder Cup playoffs, to try to get that little extra last bit of energy drained from them and force them into situations where mental fatigue, physical fatigue leads to mistakes. And I think if the T-Birds can get a combination of that possession, drag it out, wear down the defense in the offensive zone where possession offensively is your best defense, and you couple that with if Joel Hofer and Charlie Lindgren continue to do what they have shown more often than not that they're capable of doing in this postseason, I very much could see Springfield lifting a Calder Cup for an 8th time in the city's history.
Excellent. Cece, any closing thoughts from you here about the series as a whole?
Hold on to your butts. It's going to be a good one.
I think this one is going to be mostly slugfest with sprinkles of, hey, let's go racing up and down the neutral zone for like 2 minutes at a time, maybe once a game. Like I think this one is going to be a slugfest sprinkled in with some random like speed intervals that both coaches like, wait, why are we trading chances? Go back to smashing the other guy. Like I that's how I see this series. But I'm excited. I definitely think this is going to be a fun one. 2 very good atmospheres as well. But hope that you don't get caught up in the smoke from the fireworks in Chicago, the broadcast booth there.
I just need to know where the which direction the fireworks are from my vantage point, so I know where to look, and I'm not blown out of my chair.
Yeah.
Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the program. Again, you got a flight to catch, so we'll let you go here. But where can the people? I mean, you're the broadcaster of the Springfield Thunderbirds, but where can the people find you on social media?
Well, on Twitter at Ryan Smith Hockey. I don't know how I found that. I don't know how I found that handle. That wasn't a 2010 discovery. I think that was like a 2013 discovery. So how no one beat me to that was a minor miracle. But at Ryan Smith Hockey on Twitter, that's normally where you'll see my hockey insights sprinkled in with humble bragging about my Wordle scores of the day and other various minutia that probably means nothing to most people.
Ryan, you and I are cut from the same cloth in regards to showcasing our Wordle scores to to the general public. Sean prefers to go with Gordle.
Honestly, I feel like what reminds me to play Gordle is I see Ryan Smith's Wordle score. I'm
really?
I'm going to say at least a good 40% of the time, that is my reminder that I didn't do the Gordle that day, is that I see his Wordle score and I'm like, oh, that's right, I got to do that.
I'm a man of the people. What can I say?
Yes. Ryan Smith, play-by-play broadcaster, the voice of the Springfield Thunderbirds. Thank you so much for coming on the Calder Farmstead, and good luck to the Springfield Thunderbirds in the Calder Cup Finals.
Thanks so much, gentlemen.
Thanks, bud.
A big thanks to Ryan Smith, the voice of the Thunderbirds, for coming on to talk T-Birds with us and break down that half of the series. But right now, it's time to get down to brass tacks. It's picks time. Cece, who are you taking and why?
Well, I'll tell you, Springfield has looked really good with their top six forwards, and not one, but two goaltenders performing very well. And like we've said throughout the episode, Sean, Chicago is very much the same. It's like these two are just matching up so well, especially with the different types of players and the individual players that we talked about. But I believe the Wolves have more scoring depth than the Thunderbirds. Just like the conference finals, I think this one is going to go the distance when it comes to games played. And, whoa, getting a little excited there. I was going to do a drum roll, but I predict this series is going to end in Rosemont, Illinois, and that the Chicago Wolves will be your 2022 Calder Cup champions, and they're going to do it in a winner-take-all Game 7. So that's what I've got. Sean, I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
I'll give Springfield a lot of credit here. They've made it a lot farther in the playoffs than I thought they would. The model has been high on them pretty much the entire time, though. So once again, this is me not listening to the thing I program. And one of these days I will learn. Chicago won the regular season title, and they just beat the second best team in the AHL by regular season record. A series between dominant teams. I called that the de facto Calder Cup Finals, and I'm going to stand by that here. But I 100% do not expect Springfield to go quietly into that night. This is going to be a knockdown, drag-out war of attrition here. By the end of it all, when you weigh both sides, their resumes, their rosters, their coaching, special teams, style of play, everything, I think Chicago comes out just a tiny bit ahead here. And I think that's enough. I'm taking the Wolves here in a long series. I'm going to say it goes 7-2. It's going to go at least 6 games. So when we were reading off the Game 5, if necessary, I'm like, no, Game 5 is going to be necessary. I think it's going to be a lot closer than I initially thought, looking at the conference finals. But Springfield belongs here. They deserve to be here. They were a very good team all season. But I think Chicago is just a pinch better, and I think home ice matters, and they have it. The model, so we have 2 versions here of the model outputs, just because CJ Smith was not in the lineup for Game 6 against Stockton. We have obviously no injury reports, as every coach would rather tell you their home address and phone number than where CJ Smith is hurt. So without CJ Smith in the lineup, Chicago is a 50.2, so 50% plus 0.2% as a favorite in the series, otherwise known as basically a coin flip. If CJ Smith is in the lineup for the entire series, if he plays game 1 through game what we're assuming is 7, he's worth about 1.6% to the team in the series, making Chicago a 51.8% favorite in the series. Each individual game, he's worth a little under, I want to say 1% to the Wolves, assuming he comes in and like someone like Ponomarov or Stelia Mateos comes out. That's kind of a tricky aspect of making the model, but that's roughly where it is. So Chicago is a favorite in the series according to the model by literally the slimmest of margins possible, anywhere from 0.2% to 1.8%. So the model thinks the series is going to be very tight as well. I didn't do the individual breakdown of games, even though I could have in theory. The model is capable of that as it stands, but I didn't think about that until literally right now. But it seems pretty clear it's going to pick, it's most likely going to say it's going to be a 6 or 7 game series. So that is how we're all on Chicago here, but all of us acknowledging like Springfield can win. This is not this, we're not here being like, they don't have a chance. Joel Hofer. No, that's not our attitude.
No. And Sean, I'm curious before we close out this episode, has the model been more accurate because of the fact that, there's NHL teams that are getting eliminated from the playoffs. And if their AHL affiliate is also in the postseason, obviously you've got the Cavalry, that happened with Stockton. It happened with a number of teams in the postseason here.
Yeah.
Has it been more accurate in the playoffs, or was it more accurate during the regular season?
It depends on kind of how you think about that. So if you look at the model from, let's talk about the very first graph that we put out of the money puck graph, if you will, the big circular round one that has like 4 layers to it. It's a pie chart. If you look at that from where that first one is, it had Chicago is the clear favorite in everything to win the Calder Cup, win everything. Chicago was the highest percentage in all of that. Mm-hmm. But the 4th highest to win the Calder Cup was Springfield. Are we calling that accurate? I don't know. If you're looking at individual games, a lot of them are very close to 50-50. So that number is going to be probably pretty close to where the regular season was. I don't off the top of my head know, but I have kept track of it. But I know it's going to be relatively about the same than it was in the regular season, still batting above 500, probably in the 55 to 58% neighborhood, which for modeling a sport that is as random as hockey and that matchups are as close to 50-50 as we are, that's pretty decent. Like, yeah, I'm not Dom Lucian or Michael Blake McCurdy or, the evolving hockey twins. Like their models are better than mine. I've never tried to say anything other than that, but like I'm at least, in the ballpark of how accurate theirs are somewhat-ish. And that's, I feel like a pretty decent accomplishment. In terms of picking series, again, that shifts too, because we've had moments where like prior to the Providence Bruins Bridgeport series, we kind of had to guess who was going to be in the lineup for Providence. Yeah. And the way I looked at it and the way I modeled it wasn't correct because, well, I'm out here, trying to figure out, is Cameron Hughes hurt or did they rest him at the end of the season because it was meaningless 2 games and there was no need to play him? It turns out he was hurt and I didn't play in that series and I had him in, and that changes the nature of it. So that amount of guesswork is always going to be kind of tricky to plug around. In general, though, the model has been about as accurate as it was in the regular season when you take into account, those shifts that happen and updating in real time. So I'm happy with its performance. There's obviously always going to be moments in which, I've made programming error in one case in the Charlotte Bridgeport series that thankfully didn't come out to bite me. And I caught shortly after that graph got posted. But for the most part, it's done pretty well. I've been happy with it, recognizing all of the problems that it has in terms of understanding who's in the lineup every night and when guys are getting called up, or hey, suddenly CJ Smith is out of the lineup and nobody has a reason for it. And I only get to know because I saw the posted roster. So in that aspect, I think it's doing pretty well. It's been performing about the same level that the regular season model has. And given the extra level of, cloak and dagger with injuries, I think that's pretty impressive, at least from my perspective.
I mean, the fact that this was the first season you debuted it for the show and for, putting it out on the Twitter account, putting it out on Facebook and everything like that. And it's engaging the fans positively, negatively, whatever the fans have to say, they're engaging with it. And as creatures that enjoy media, the human beings in general, like to have that concrete image, graph, and those predictions and those game probabilities. I mean, it's engaging. And especially with the AHL getting into sports betting and everything like that, I think it's going to be pretty effective. And and I know you're going to tweak it and develop it and make it even better for next year too.
Yep. I already have some things in mind that I want to do for next season that will help improve the accuracy of it, or at least in my mind will help improve the accuracy of it. I can't imagine it won't, but I've been wrong before about what's going to make it better versus worse. Some other things that I want to tweak. But it'll be interesting to see, where things go forward. And I think the one thing that kind of like our podcast in general that helps is that, a lot of AHL fans are not fans of the league or fans of a division. They're fans of their team, and they can maybe, name 5 guys that are on, teams that they play. Sure. But by and large, they're not aware of, the other divisions, the other conferences. They might know the names of the teams, but they couldn't tell you, who's on those teams. And being able to see, a graph that has the entire league on it and where your team is, it gives you a better, it's never going to be a perfect encapsulation of the AHL. It's never going to work that way. There's too much, random noise in hockey for that to be possible. But for people to be able to see that and have a general idea of where their team is, where their players are, how they stack up around the league, kind of like our podcast in general. We get to see all these players. We get to see all these teams. We have a better sense than your, average AHL fan of, how good Chicago is compared to Springfield, 2 teams that have literally never played each other. I think that's been the most important part and why fans are engaging with it, why they see it. And even if they don't agree with it, they at least, are enjoying it because it's giving them, a decent baseline of where the rest of the league is compared to them. And I think that's good. And that was always my goal. It was A, to make it so it is as right as often as possible, and B, for people to give people that kind of understanding of where the rest of the league is, because there isn't a whole lot of league-wide coverage. There is no, AHL on TNT or a show on ESPN dedicated to the AHL. It's pretty much just us and like a handful of other people out here doing our best. But thank you for choosing us to listen to. And that's all we got to say. Cece, let's wrap it up here.
Absolutely. Yep. That's it for the show. Thank you to listening or watching and or listening to us. The Calder Farmstead is part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and several other great hockey, sports, and pro wrestling programs at fullpresscoverage.com. Just click on that podcast drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website, that main page there. That's the list of podcasts populating. It's a big one. And enjoy. And like Shawnee said, out of all the great programming out there, both Full Press Network and otherwise, you choose to stay with us and you choose to listen to us and our AHL coverage, and we thoroughly appreciate it. Thank you.
And if you guys are enjoying the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment what you thought of the episode. Click all the little buttons down there. Go crazy. See what happens. But doing so helps others find the show, and your reviews help us improve the show. You can also follow us on social media at Calder Farmstead on Twitter, at The Calder Farmstead on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more can be found on our Linktree page, which is linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's AD_DYSFUNCTION. So we can make music for you too. Cece, where can the people find you?
My name is CC Hockley. You can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at FPC_AHL. Find all the latest transactions and news through that account. And then my personal account, of course, at CC Hawk. That's SEESEEHAWK. hockey tweets, music tweets, pop culture, music, and of course my Wordle scores. If it keeps me interested, hopefully it's not going to be bullshit for you. You can check out my writing on the Full Press Coverage Network at fullpresshockey.com. I just put out an article today, which is Friday, the day that we're recording. And it's my proposed divisional realignment for 2022-23. And as Sean O'Brien put it himself, it is a interesting take on what the divisions should look like. And yeah, go and check it out. Agree with me, disagree with me. And apparently a lot of Springfield fans are not happy with Springfield moving to the North Division instead of the Atlantic. It's a hypothetical, so relax. It's okay. Just my opinion. Sean, enough of me. Where can the people find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien. You can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SeanObrien 81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien _81. If you followed that at all, you get to see a little bit of my Jamaica vacation. I thought I had a good time, posted some fun pics. You can also find my stats work at Tableau. All of the money puck style graphs, all of the graphs that you probably have ever seen about this league that weren't, from the AHL's official page itself. You can find on my Tableau page at bit.ly/data-dump-and-chase, all lowercase, all one word. Cece, this has been a marathon episode, but it's the Calder Cup Finals. If we're not going long here, when are we? That being said, please take us home.
That will do it for episode number 106 for the Calder Farmstead, an AHL podcast, in case you hadn't figured that out by now. For Sean O'Brien, I'm Cece Hockley, and as always, keep your stick on the ice.